In the heart of the Vatican, a shadowy figure wields power beyond what most could ever imagine. While the Pope stands as the public face of the Catholic Church, there exists a hidden force, an enigma whose influence extends across global politics, education, and even military strategy. This figure, known only as the Black Pope, operates in the shadows, orchestrating decisions that shape the destiny of the Church and the world itself. His authority is unmatched, yet largely unseen, and the question remains: what drives this elusive leader, and what secrets lie behind the walls of his power? The Vatican, a bastion of centuries-old tradition, is steeped in an aura of devotion and sanctity. But hidden beneath this facade is a web of secrets that, when unraveled, reveals a far darker narrative. Among the many shadows cast over its history is the figure of the Black Pope, a mysterious entity whose existence has been the subject of whispers and conspiracy for centuries. While the public knows the Pope as the face of the Catholic Church, there is another, lesser-known power figure whose influence extends far beyond the ceremonial and public realms. This man, often considered the head of the Jesuit order, is referred to as the Black Pope, a title that evokes both awe and fear. But why is this figure so elusive, and why does his influence remain so potent, even today? To understand the significance of the Black Pope, we must first look at the Jesuit order, a religious society founded in 1534 by Ignatius of Loyola. Initially intended to protect and propagate the faith during the volatile period of the Protestant Reformation, the Jesuits quickly gained recognition not only for their theological scholarship but for their involvement in political and military affairs. Their ability to navigate the most dangerous of political environments, from royal courts to the heart of the Vatican, allowed them to amass significant influence, not only in religious matters but in secular ones as well. The Jesuits' influence was not limited to the spiritual realm. They played a pivotal role in shaping political discourse across Europe, establishing schools and universities, influencing kings and queens, and navigating the currents of world politics. They became central figures in both the defense of Catholic orthodoxy and the expansion of European imperialism, often working behind the scenes in ways that seemed far beyond the scope of traditional religious orders. This growing influence, however, was not without its dangers. Many feared the vast power that the Jesuits had accumulated, which led to their suppression by papal decree in 1773. Despite this, their expulsion from the papacy did little to diminish their power. The Jesuits reformed and re-established themselves, eventually returning to power under the watchful eye of the Pope. But with this return came a profound shift. The Black Pope, while never officially recognized as the head of the Church, assumed an unparalleled position of control within the Vatican. The head of the Jesuit order, known as the Superior General, wields immense power, an influence that, in some cases, rivals that of the Pope himself. While the Pope is seen as the face of Catholicism, the Superior General operates largely in the shadows, exercising his will through manipulation, education, and often through the labyrinthine politics of the Vatican itself. The title of the Black Pope is not a formal one but is a product of his deep, unseen influence over the Catholic Church. The black refers not to the color of his robes, but to the secrecy and intrigue surrounding his actions and motives. The Jesuit order's rise to power was not a sudden event. It was gradual, careful, and calculated. The order's mission was clear: to defend the faith, spread the gospel, and strengthen the Catholic Church in the face of external threats. But over time, the Jesuits began to adopt a more pragmatic approach, recognizing that faith could be spread not just through preaching, but also through influence. The ability to control education, politics, and the flow of information became just as important as preaching the Word of God. It was through these tools that the Jesuits, and by extension, the Black Pope, grew to control not only the Church but much of the political and economic landscape of Europe. Perhaps the most disconcerting aspect of the Black Pope's power lies in his ability to operate without being seen. Unlike the Pope, who is publicly visible and politically accountable, the Black Pope's power is wielded from the shadows, using networks of influence that stretch far beyond the borders of the Vatican. His reach extends into the highest corridors of government, the financial elite, and even into the very fabric of global culture. The power of the Black Pope is not derived from religious decree or spiritual authority but from a more subtle, insidious force, control over knowledge, access, and, most disturbingly, people. The Jesuits are often described as the Church's most disciplined and intelligent order. Their training is rigorous, emphasizing education, strategic thinking, and loyalty. The order's members often become key advisors to monarchs, heads of state, and influential leaders. In this way, the Black Pope has, over centuries, cultivated an elite cadre of individuals who remain loyal to the order, whether or not they are officially members. This network of influence, while not always visible to the public eye, is said to stretch across the globe, ensuring that the Jesuits and their hidden leader hold sway over the most significant political, financial, and social decisions. At the heart of the mystery surrounding the Black Pope is the chilling notion that his power is unchecked. While the Pope is subject to the will of the College of Cardinals and the wider Church, the Black Pope is not. His position within the Jesuit order is secured by a vow of absolute obedience from his subordinates, a fact that allows him to operate with unparalleled autonomy. Those who occupy the position of Superior General are not elected by the people or the cardinals but are appointed by the order itself. This gives the Black Pope a level of power that is entirely independent of the papacy and the traditional structure of the Catholic Church. The Black Pope's hidden influence has been the subject of many theories and speculations. Some suggest that he controls the world's financial systems, manipulating markets and economies through his network of Jesuit-trained individuals. Others point to the order's involvement in global geopolitics, suggesting that the Black Pope plays a key role in directing conflicts, managing diplomatic relations, and shaping the trajectory of world events. Still, others argue that the Black Pope's power is not in the material world but in the realm of ideas, controlling the direction of thought, both within the Church and in broader society. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Black Pope's power is the fact that it remains largely invisible. While many people are familiar with the Pope's role as the spiritual leader of the Catholic Church, the Black Pope operates in secrecy, behind the walls of the Vatican. His influence is not exerted through public acts or speeches, but through the quiet manipulation of events, policies, and decisions that are often far removed from the gaze of the public. The Black Pope does not need to be seen to be effective. His influence is felt in the decisions made by those in power, even if they are unaware of the source of that influence. Perhaps the most disconcerting question that arises when considering the Black Pope is, what is his ultimate goal? What drives a man to seek such power, and what does he intend to do with it? The answer to this question remains elusive, but the implications are chilling. Does the Black Pope seek to protect the Church and its ideals, or does he have a more sinister agenda? Is his influence wielded for the greater good, or is it part of a grand, hidden plan to reshape the world in a way that we cannot even begin to imagine? The figure of the Black Pope remains one of the most mysterious and chilling aspects of modern history. His power is immense, yet largely unseen. His influence extends to every corner of the world, yet he remains shrouded in secrecy. As we look deeper into the history of the Jesuits and their role in shaping the world, we begin to realize that the Black Pope is not just a historical figure but a symbol of something far more profound. His existence challenges our understanding of power, control, and faith. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the true nature of influence and whether the forces that shape our world are truly in our hands or if they are being guided by unseen forces, forces that operate in the shadows beyond our reach and comprehension. As we peel back the layers of this mystery, we must ask ourselves, what is the true nature of the Black Pope's power? And more importantly, what does it mean for us today, as we live in a world that is more interconnected, more surveilled, and more manipulated than ever before? The answers to these questions may be more chilling than we could ever imagine, and they may hold the key to understanding the future of the world itself. The Vatican stands as one of the most powerful and ancient institutions in the world, with centuries of history woven into the very fabric of its stone walls. Yet beneath its polished exterior lies a hidden world, a labyrinth of power struggles, secrets, and intrigues that few outside its walls can even begin to comprehend. It is here, within this world of shadows, that the figure of the Black Pope emerges, a mysterious and largely unseen force who holds sway over both the spiritual and secular domains of the Church. To understand the true nature of the Black Pope and his influence, one must first explore the power structures that govern the Vatican, the dynamics of its most powerful orders, and the ways in which these intersect and diverge in a world where power is often hidden in plain sight. The Vatican, while primarily seen as the center of the Catholic faith, is also a political entity, a nation-state in its own right, with its own government, laws, and complex bureaucracy. Within this tight-knit and often impenetrable world, the Pope holds the ultimate religious authority. Yet, this position, though supreme in matters of faith, is not always as all-encompassing as one might think. For while the Pope is the head of the Church, he is not always the ultimate authority when it comes to the Church's inner workings or its influence on the world stage. This is where the Black Pope comes into play, a figure whose influence is quietly woven into the very fabric of the Vatican's power structures, often in ways that are imperceptible to the outside world. At the heart of this unseen influence lies the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, an order founded in the 16th century by Ignatius of Loyola. Originally established as a military order dedicated to the defense of the Catholic faith, the Jesuits quickly gained prominence within the Church due to their rigorous education, discipline, and loyalty to the Pope. But as their influence grew, so did their power, and it soon became clear that the Jesuits were not content with merely serving as the Pope's loyal soldiers. Instead, they began to carve out their own sphere of influence, expanding their reach far beyond the walls of the Church and into the realms of education, politics, and economics. The Jesuits set up schools and universities throughout Europe, training the next generation of leaders, philosophers, and politicians. In doing so, they began to subtly shape the world's intellectual and political landscape. While the Jesuits were publicly loyal to the Pope, their influence within the Vatican itself began to rival that of the papacy. Their unparalleled ability to infiltrate the highest levels of political power, both within the Church and outside of it, meant that they were able to exert control over key decisions in the Vatican. The Superior General of the Jesuit Order, a position held by the Black Pope, became one of the most powerful figures in the Catholic Church, wielding an authority that extended far beyond the religious sphere. The Superior General was not merely an advisor to the Pope. He was a shadow leader, a hidden power whose influence permeated every aspect of the Church's operations. The title of the Black Pope is not an official one. It is a term coined by those who recognize the Superior General's vast, often unseen, control over the Church's actions and policies. The Black Pope does not sit on a throne or hold any public office, but his influence is felt in every decision the Vatican makes. In many ways, the Black Pope's power is even more potent than that of the Pope himself. While the Pope's authority is largely symbolic, tied to his role as the spiritual leader of the Catholic Church, the Black Pope operates behind the scenes, shaping the Church's policies, guiding its decisions, and controlling its resources. This power is not derived from the traditional trappings of papal authority, such as the tiara or the ring of office, but from the sheer force of influence. The Black Pope is not bound by the rituals and ceremonies of the Church. Instead, he operates in the shadows, manipulating events and people from behind the curtain. This ability to operate unseen, to guide the course of history without being recognized as the source of that guidance, is what makes the Black Pope such a potent figure. He is the hidden hand, the mastermind whose influence extends far beyond the Vatican and into the very heart of global affairs. The relationship between the Pope and the Black Pope is a complex one, rooted in a delicate balance of power. On the surface, the Pope is the supreme leader of the Catholic Church, with the ultimate authority in all matters of faith and doctrine. But the true nature of this relationship is far more nuanced. While the Pope is the spiritual leader, the Black Pope holds sway over the political and strategic aspects of the Church's operations. The Pope may be the public face of the Church, but it is the Black Pope who often pulls the strings behind the scenes. This dynamic has existed for centuries, with the Jesuits playing a crucial role in the Vatican's rise to global prominence. The Jesuits' rise to power was not an overnight occurrence. It was the result of careful, calculated strategy. In the 16th century, Europe was embroiled in religious wars, with the Protestant Reformation threatening the very fabric of the Catholic Church. The Jesuits emerged as a response to this threat, a religious order dedicated to defending the Church against heresy and restoring its influence. But as the Jesuits grew in strength, they began to shift their focus from mere defense to global domination. They understood that the key to maintaining control was not just spiritual dominance, but political influence. To achieve this, they cultivated relationships with monarchs, diplomats, and other powerful figures, positioning themselves as advisors, educators, and strategists. The Jesuits' involvement in education was particularly significant. By establishing schools and universities, they were able to train future leaders in the ways of the Church and, more importantly, in the ways of Jesuit influence. These institutions became breeding grounds for the next generation of political and intellectual elites, many of whom would go on to hold positions of power in their respective countries. In this way, the Jesuits were able to ensure that their ideas and values would continue to shape the course of history long after their original founders had passed. The Jesuit order thus became a global network of influence, with members spread across the world and embedded in the corridors of power. The Black Pope's control over the Jesuit order allowed him to shape the destiny of the Church and the world in ways that few could comprehend. The superior general's ability to manipulate the Vatican's inner workings, to influence the selection of bishops, cardinals, and even the Pope himself, made him a figure of unparalleled power. The Black Pope's role was not to govern the Church in the traditional sense, but to act as a shadow leader, guiding the course of events without being seen. His influence was felt in every corner of the world, from the courts of European monarchs to the backrooms of the Vatican. He was the hidden architect of global affairs, a figure whose actions were felt but whose name was rarely spoken. This unseen influence of the Black Pope extended far beyond the Vatican's borders. The Jesuits, as a global order, had a reach that few other organizations could match. They were involved in missionary work, exploration, and diplomacy, establishing a presence in every corner of the world. From Asia to the Americas, the Jesuits played a key role in shaping the cultural, political, and economic landscapes of the places they visited. They established vast networks of influence that allowed them to control the flow of information, resources, and power. The Black Pope's role in this global network was not merely that of a spiritual leader, but of a strategist and manipulator who understood the importance of controlling not only religious institutions but also the very machinery of empire. But this influence did not come without its challenges. As the Jesuits grew in power, they also attracted enemies. In the 18th century, the order was expelled from several countries, and in 1773, Pope Clement XIV formally suppressed the Jesuit order, citing their growing influence and power as a threat to the Church. However, even this suppression did little to halt the Jesuits' reach. The order reformed itself, and by the 19th century, it had regained much of its former power. The Black Pope, ever the shadowy figure, continued to exert his influence from behind the scenes, guiding the Jesuits through turbulent times and ensuring their survival. Despite the official suppression, the Jesuits never truly disappeared. They simply adapted, evolving into a more clandestine force, one whose power continued to shape the fate of nations and the course of history. The influence of the Black Pope remains largely hidden from public view, but it is no less real. In a world that is increasingly interconnected, the networks of influence established by the Jesuits are more powerful than ever. From education to politics, from economics to media, the reach of the Black Pope and his order extends into every corner of modern society. In this complex web of power, the Black Pope remains a figure of immense influence, a man whose name is rarely spoken, but whose presence is felt in every major decision that shapes the world. As we peer deeper into the shadows of the Vatican's corridors, we begin to realize that the Black Pope is not just a relic of the past, but a living force, quietly shaping the future of our world. The Society of Jesus, more commonly known as the Jesuits, was founded in the early 16th century by Ignatius of Loyola, a man whose very life seemed destined for something greater. Born into a noble family in Spain, Ignatius was initially driven by the pursuit of glory and military honor. His early life was one of ambition, seeking to make a name for himself on the battlefield. Yet, everything changed after a debilitating injury during a siege that left him bedridden for months. It was during this period of physical recovery that Ignatius experienced a profound spiritual transformation. Struggling with his new reality, he turned to books of religious devotion and contemplation. And in these moments of solitude, Ignatius experienced what he would later describe as a divine calling. This period of reflection ignited a radical shift in his life's mission, and it would shape not only his personal journey but also the future of the Catholic Church and, by extension, the course of history. Unlike many other religious orders, the Jesuits were not initially formed around a monastic vow of silence or seclusion from the world. Instead, Ignatius envisioned an order of soldiers of Christ, men who would engage directly with the world, using their education, intellect, and strategic acumen to defend and spread the Catholic faith. The Jesuits were founded with a singular mission: to combat heresy, preserve the authority of the Pope, and engage in a worldwide campaign to reassert the dominance of Catholicism in a time of unprecedented religious upheaval. This was a period when the Protestant Reformation was challenging the very foundation of Catholic power across Europe. The split that Martin Luther initiated had fractured the Christian world, and the Catholic Church was on the defensive. Ignatius and his followers responded with a fervor that would eventually make them one of the most influential orders in the history of the Church. The Society of Jesus was not merely a theological response to the Reformation. It was an intellectual and strategic one. Ignatius recognized that in order to effectively combat Protestantism and ensure Catholicism's survival, the Church would need more than just spiritual leaders. It would need a cadre of highly educated and politically savvy individuals who could engage with the most powerful institutions of their time. The Jesuits, from their inception, made education a cornerstone of their mission. They established schools, colleges, and universities across Europe, training future generations of priests, politicians, and philosophers in the ways of the Church. But their influence didn't stop at religious education. The Jesuits also understood the importance of controlling the intellectual and political narratives of their time. They were quick to embed themselves in the political courts of Europe, advising kings, queens, and emperors on matters both spiritual and temporal. Through their education and political involvement, they began to slowly infiltrate the highest echelons of European society. But while their educational and political reach expanded, it was the Jesuits' most insidious weapon: their ability to adapt to any environment, that ensured their rise to unparalleled power. Unlike many religious orders that remained tied to a singular location or mission, the Jesuits were flexible. They became missionaries, traveling far and wide to places where Catholicism had little foothold, from the Americas to Asia to Africa. In the Americas, they worked with indigenous populations, establishing missions that not only spread Christianity but also exerted political and economic influence. In Asia, particularly in Japan and China, they established an intellectual presence, often aligning themselves with local elites and even gaining access to the imperial courts. Their ability to blend into these cultures, speaking local languages, and adapting Catholic teachings to fit local traditions, made them uniquely effective at both spreading the faith and gaining power. They were no longer just a religious order. They were a global force, quietly shaping the world's political and intellectual landscapes. But it was not just through diplomacy or missionary work that the Jesuits garnered influence. Their military prowess and tactical thinking were also critical to their success. In fact, Ignatius himself had been a soldier before founding the order, and he incorporated many of the strategies he learned on the battlefield into the Jesuit formation. The order's commitment to discipline, obedience, and rigorous intellectual training made them formidable opponents to anyone who stood in their way. This military aspect of the Jesuits' identity was more than just symbolic. It was practical. In a world where political power was often defined by control over armies, the Jesuits understood that to wield real influence, they needed to have a hand in the politics of Europe's most powerful kingdoms. Despite the Jesuits' rapid rise, their power did not go unnoticed. As the order's influence expanded, so did the fear and suspicion surrounding them. While their educational work was widely praised, their political and military engagements made them the target of countless enemies. European monarchs, threatened by the Jesuits' growing influence in both the church and the political sphere, began to perceive them as a threat to their own power. Their opponents accused them of manipulating governments, controlling political leaders, and pursuing an agenda that was more about expanding their own influence than spreading the faith. These accusations were not without merit. The Jesuits were, after all, highly skilled at using education, persuasion, and strategic positioning to influence those in power. But it was their secretive nature and their ability to operate behind the scenes that truly set them apart from other religious orders. The climax of this tension came in the 18th century when the Jesuits were officially expelled from several countries, including France, Portugal, and Spain, and eventually suppressed by Pope Clement XIV in 1773. This marked the end of a golden era for the order, but, as history would prove, the Jesuits would not be easily silenced. Despite their formal suppression, the order found ways to persist, re-establishing itself in the 19th century under the protection of influential Catholic leaders. This period of recovery was crucial for the Jesuits' future influence, as they not only regained their former status within the Church, but also deepened their role in global politics and education. In the modern era, the Jesuit order continues to wield enormous influence, both within the Catholic Church and in broader society. Their educational institutions, such as universities and schools, are among the most prestigious in the world. But it is their more subtle power, their ability to influence global events from behind the scenes, that continues to make them a force to be reckoned with. One of the key reasons the Jesuits have been so successful in maintaining their influence over the centuries is their ability to adapt to changing political and social climates. Their commitment to obedience and their willingness to serve wherever and however they are needed has allowed them to remain a powerful, albeit hidden, force within both the Church and the broader global order. The Black Pope, the head of the Jesuit order, is perhaps the most enigmatic of all figures within the Catholic Church. While the Pope is seen as the spiritual leader of the Church, the Black Pope is often considered to be the true power behind the throne. The Superior General, as the Black Pope is sometimes called, is not elected by the people or even the College of Cardinals, but rather by the Jesuit order itself. This means that the Black Pope's power is not derived from the traditional structures of the Church. He operates outside of the Vatican's public gaze, a shadowy figure whose influence is felt far beyond the walls of the Church. The Black Pope's true role is not widely understood, but his power, and the extent to which it shapes both the Catholic Church and the global political landscape, is undeniable. In many ways, the Black Pope's power is more insidious than that of the visible Pope. While the Pope is bound by the expectations of the Church and the Catholic faithful, the Black Pope operates without these constraints. His influence is exerted through networks of education, politics, and diplomacy. He is a master of strategy, a figure whose control over the global political chessboard is often unseen, but no less real. As the head of the Jesuits, the Black Pope holds sway over the most influential institutions in the world, from universities and political organizations to corporations and media outlets. His influence stretches far beyond the Church, reaching into the very heart of world affairs. And yet, despite this vast power, the Black Pope remains an enigma, a figure who operates behind closed doors, manipulating events from the shadows. The Jesuit order's global influence, both past and present, raises unsettling questions about the nature of power and control. How much of the world's history has been shaped by the Jesuits and, by extension, the Black Pope? How many of the world's most important decisions have been guided by unseen hands, pulling the strings of the powerful and the influential? These are questions that have haunted historians, conspiracy theorists, and the general public alike for centuries. As we peel back the layers of history and uncover the true extent of the Jesuit order's influence, we are left with a chilling realization. The Black Pope may be one of the most powerful men in the world, and yet, his name is barely known outside the walls of the Vatican. In the annals of history, certain moments emerge that define not only the trajectory of nations, but also the very fabric of human identity. These moments are often seated in the most unlikely of places, far from the battlefields and royal courts, in the quiet corners where unseen hands mold the course of events. The early days of the Jesuit order or the Society of Jesus is one such defining moment. It was not just the establishment of a religious order that took place in the 16th century, but the creation of an entity whose influence would ripple through history, from the heart of the Catholic Church to the highest halls of power. It was a calculated movement, born out of necessity, but propelled by something far more profound, the vision of Ignatius of Loyola, a man whose very life was a testament to the paradox of human ambition and divine purpose. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order, was not born with the title of saint, nor was he ordained with the intention of founding a worldwide religious society. In fact, his early life was far removed from the path of holiness. He was a soldier, a man driven by a desire for glory and prestige, much like the knights of his time. But fate, as it often does, took a turn. Ignatius was gravely injured in battle, and during his long period of recovery, he turned inward. He began reading religious texts, not out of a desire to devote himself to the church, but out of necessity, as he had little else to do. It was during this period of physical confinement that Ignatius experienced a spiritual awakening, one that would change not only his life but the entire future of Catholicism. In his mind, the call to serve God became a call to service not just for himself, but for the larger church, a church that was embroiled in the turmoil of the Protestant Reformation. The Reformation, sparked by the actions of Martin Luther and others, had divided Europe along religious lines. The Catholic Church, once the supreme authority in religious matters, now faced a challenge to its very foundations. It was in this moment of crisis that Ignatius saw an opportunity, not just to defend the Church but to redefine its place in the world. He envisioned an order that would not retreat from the world but would engage with it directly, actively working to shape the future of Christianity and, by extension, the world itself. This was the birth of the Jesuit order. Ignatius' vision was revolutionary in many ways. The Jesuits were not to be secluded monks, detached from the world and the struggles of humanity. They were to be soldiers of faith, actively involved in the world's intellectual, political, and social spheres. Ignatius sought to create an army of men, bound by a vow of obedience, who would go wherever the need was greatest, from the war-torn battlefields of Europe to the uncharted lands of the Americas and Asia. The Jesuits were tasked with spreading the Catholic faith, yes, but also with defending it against the encroaching influence of Protestantism and other external threats. In a way, the order was not just a religious movement, but a political one, an organized response to the challenges that faced the Church and the broader world. The first Jesuits were not priests in the traditional sense. They were intellectuals, educators, and missionaries, trained to think strategically and act decisively. Ignatius insisted on an education that would prepare them to engage with the intellectual currents of the time, which were rapidly changing due to the influence of the Renaissance and the rise of humanism. They were not to be passive observers of the world but active participants in shaping it. The Jesuit education was rigorous, designed to produce men who could navigate the complexities of both religious and secular life with equal adeptness. It was this dual focus on education and engagement that allowed the Jesuits to gain the influence they did, not just within the Church but within European society at large. One of the Jesuits' most innovative contributions was their approach to education. The order established schools and universities across Europe, creating an intellectual network that would spread across the continent and beyond. These institutions were not just centers of learning. They became training grounds for the future leaders of Europe. The Jesuits understood that the key to maintaining power was not only through military might but through the power of ideas. By educating the elite of Europe, they ensured that their influence would extend into the highest echelons of society, where decisions were made and policies shaped. The Jesuit schools produced philosophers, scientists, diplomats, and even future popes, all men who were, in some way, indebted to the order for their education and worldview. This network of intellectuals gave the Jesuits the ability to exert influence far beyond their immediate religious role. But it was not only through education that the Jesuits gained their power. They also became deeply involved in the political and military affairs of the time. They were often called upon to serve as advisors to monarchs, providing counsel on religious and political matters. The Jesuits' involvement in politics was strategic, and it often placed them at the heart of the most important political decisions of the time. The Jesuits were skilled diplomats, able to navigate the complexities of international relations with a deftness that made them invaluable to the rulers of Europe. Their ability to remain neutral and to work with both Catholic and Protestant powers alike allowed them to operate in a world where religious conflicts were often the driving force behind political alliances. The Jesuits' influence extended far beyond Europe. As the order grew, it spread to the Americas, Africa, and Asia, where it played a crucial role in the spread of Catholicism to new territories. In the Americas, the Jesuits established missions among the indigenous peoples, bringing not only the Catholic faith but also European cultural practices, political structures, and agricultural techniques. In Asia, the Jesuits were particularly active, establishing missions in Japan, China, and India, where they adapted Catholicism to fit the local cultures and engaged with local elites. Their ability to engage with diverse cultures and to integrate themselves into foreign societies allowed the Jesuits to create a global network of influence that was unparalleled in the history of the Church. Despite their success, the Jesuits' growing power attracted enemies. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the order became embroiled in political disputes with European monarchs, who feared the Jesuits' growing influence over their courts. The Jesuits were accused of manipulating governments, controlling monarchs, and acting as a secretive, powerful force behind the scenes. The political tensions reached a peak in the 18th century, when several European countries expelled the Jesuits from their territories, and in 1773 Pope Clement XIV, under pressure from European powers, suppressed the Society of Jesus entirely. This was a dramatic moment in the history of the Jesuits, but it was not the end of the story. The suppression of the Jesuits did not destroy them. The order had already spread too far, and its influence was too deeply embedded in the fabric of European and global society to be eradicated completely. In the decades that followed, the Jesuits would quietly regroup, finding new ways to operate within the structures of the Church and in the political arenas of Europe. They would return to prominence in the 19th century, once again proving their resilience and adaptability. The order's ability to reinvent itself, to re-establish its influence after facing such a monumental setback, speaks to the remarkable foresight and resilience that Ignatius of Loyola instilled in the Jesuits from the beginning. Throughout the history of the Jesuit order, one constant has been its ability to adapt. The Jesuits have weathered centuries of challenges, from the political pressures of the 18th century to the internal reforms of the 20th century. They have transformed themselves from a military order into one of the most influential religious orders in the world. Today, the Jesuits continue to play a central role in the Catholic Church, with their schools and universities shaping the minds of future leaders and their missionary work continuing across the globe. Their influence extends far beyond the walls of the Church, into the realms of politics, education, and culture. But it is the role of the Black Pope, the Superior General of the Jesuit order, that remains one of the most enigmatic and powerful positions within the Catholic Church. The Superior General's authority, though officially religious, extends into all areas of life, political, social, and intellectual. The Black Pope is not just the head of a religious order. He is a strategist, a diplomat, a master of influence and power. His power is not derived from public visibility or the pomp and ceremony of the papacy, but from the ability to control the networks of influence that the Jesuits have carefully cultivated over the centuries. In many ways, the Black Pope remains the shadow leader of the Church, a man whose name is rarely spoken, but whose presence is deeply felt in the corridors of power across the world. As we look at the Jesuit order's history, we see not just the story of a religious movement, but the story of a carefully crafted plan to shape the world's intellectual, political, and religious landscapes. Ignatius of Loyola, in his vision for the Jesuits, understood that the future of the Catholic Church, and perhaps the future of the world, depended on more than just spiritual devotion. It depended on the ability to engage with the world on its own terms, to control not just the hearts and minds of people but also the structures of power that govern the world. This vision, crafted centuries ago, continues to shape the world today, making the Jesuits not just a religious order, but a global force with the power to shape the future. The story of the Jesuits is one of strategic vision, intellectual might, and an unwavering commitment to their mission. But it is also a tale marked by power struggles, both within the Catholic Church and across the global stage. As the Society of Jesus expanded and entrenched itself in the affairs of European monarchies, the order became more than just a religious force. It became a network of influence, a secretive power structure that operated on multiple levels, from education and diplomacy to politics and economics. The more powerful the Jesuits became, the more their adversaries grew wary of their control. The term Black Pope, although never an official title, began to echo as an ominous descriptor for the head of the Jesuit order, the Superior General, whose influence within the Vatican and beyond seemed to overshadow even that of the visible Pope. The Jesuits' rise to power was not simply a product of spiritual fervor or devotion. It was a product of ambition, discipline, and foresight. At their core, the Jesuits were soldiers of faith, as Ignatius of Loyola envisioned them, but they were also diplomats, educators, and strategists. They were not merely defenders of Catholicism, but were actively engaged in reshaping the world around them. The order's focus on education gave them an unparalleled ability to influence generations of the elite. The Jesuit educational system, founded on the principles of intellectual rigor, combined with moral and spiritual discipline, began to attract future leaders of Europe's political, military, and intellectual spheres. Over time, Jesuit-educated men would occupy prominent positions in the church, the courts of kings, and the universities that became the breeding grounds for Europe's intellectual revolutions. In their quest for global influence, the Jesuits were not confined by geographic or cultural boundaries. Their missionary work was one of the most ambitious and wide-reaching aspects of their strategy. With an understanding that the Church could not simply defend its existing strongholds but must actively spread its reach to the farthest corners of the world, the Jesuits ventured into territories previously untouched by European influence. They entered the Americas, where they established missions among indigenous populations, often integrating Catholic teachings with local customs in a way that made their approach both revolutionary and practical. In places like Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina, the Jesuits became deeply involved in the lives of the native peoples, not only spreading Catholicism but also helping to establish social and political systems that often set them apart from colonial authorities. Their missions became self-sustaining, operating as semi-autonomous enclaves within the broader colonial infrastructure. It was here, in these isolated pockets of resistance to colonialism, that the Jesuits gained a reputation for their unyielding pursuit of religious and social justice. In Asia, the Jesuits were just as strategic. The missionary work in Japan and China was notable for its intellectual depth and cultural sensitivity. The Jesuits, led by figures like Francis Xavier, adapted Catholicism to the local traditions, making it more palatable to the local aristocracies and intellectuals. They gained favor with the rulers, often becoming influential figures within the courts of Asia's greatest empires. The Jesuits were uniquely skilled at navigating the complex webs of power in the East, using their education and diplomatic skills to insert themselves into the highest ranks of Chinese and Japanese society. Through this, they were able to spread Christianity in a manner that was respectful of local customs, though not without controversy. The Jesuits were in many ways pioneers of intercultural exchange, bridging the divide between Europe and Asia in a way that was rare for their time. While the Jesuits were winning battles in the cultural and intellectual arenas, they were also making political enemies. As their influence grew, so did the suspicion surrounding them. To some, the Jesuits were nothing more than a clandestine political force, working to control governments, influence monarchs, and shape the world in their image. For these critics, the Jesuit order was not just a religious society but a covert power structure, one that was subverting the traditional power dynamics of Europe. Monarchs who were wary of the Jesuits' growing influence in their courts, and their increasing control over the minds and actions of the European elite, began to view the order as a dangerous entity. The Jesuits' skill in manipulating public opinion and shaping political outcomes made them formidable foes. It was not just their spiritual authority that was in question, but their ability to orchestrate political change, sometimes by behind-the-scenes maneuvering, other times by directly influencing royal courts. Their enemies saw the Jesuits' sophisticated network of spies, informants, and politically influential alumni as evidence of a shadowy power that sought to manipulate the world. This growing resentment culminated in the 18th century, when the Jesuit order became the target of a widespread campaign to undermine and expel them from many European countries. France, Spain, Portugal, and several other nations, feeling the Jesuits' influence in their political decisions, began to pressure the Vatican to suppress the order. In 1773, Pope Clement XIV, under immense political pressure, officially suppressed the Jesuit order, formally dissolving it across the Catholic world. The expulsion was not just a defeat for the Jesuits but a direct attack on their legitimacy and power. For the first time in their history, the Jesuits found themselves outlawed, their property seized, and their members dispersed. Yet, even in the face of this extraordinary setback, the Jesuits did not disappear. The suppression of the Jesuits in the 18th century marked a significant turning point in their history. The order's dissolution by papal decree was a momentary victory for their adversaries, but it was far from the end of the story. The Jesuits, ever resilient, adapted to their new circumstances. Many members of the order continued their work in secret, and the intellectual network they had built over the centuries was too deeply entrenched to be dismantled overnight. In the years following their suppression, Jesuits found ways to work under different guises and continue their mission, though they operated outside the formal structures of the Catholic Church. It was during this time that the Black Pope's influence remained potent, even if he no longer held an official position within the Vatican. In the 19th century, as Europe shifted toward more modern political and social structures, the Jesuits began to reassert themselves. The order was formally restored by Pope Pius VII in 1814, and with their return, they re-established their network of influence across the globe. They began rebuilding the schools, universities, and missions that had been lost during their suppression, and they again became a key force in the political and intellectual life of Europe and beyond. However, the methods they employed were different this time. The Jesuits had learned from the trauma of their suppression, and they were now more cautious, operating with an awareness of the political dangers that surrounded them. In the modern world, the Jesuits were not just a religious order but a powerful global network, whose reach extended into the worlds of finance, education, media, and diplomacy. They were no longer simply involved in the religious life of Europe. They were influencing the direction of world history, from the political to the cultural to the scientific. In many ways, the resurgence of the Jesuits in the 19th and 20th centuries reflected the modern world's increasing recognition of their intellectual and strategic value. Jesuit schools became some of the most prestigious institutions of higher learning, producing future leaders and intellectuals who would go on to shape the course of history. The Jesuit commitment to education, rooted in Ignatius of Loyola's original vision, became one of the cornerstones of their influence. The Jesuits were not just shaping the minds of future Catholic priests but also educating the global elite. Their graduates would go on to occupy positions of power in governments, corporations, and media organizations, ensuring that the Jesuit worldview, rooted in Catholic orthodoxy, intellectual rigor, and strategic thinking, would continue to shape the world's political, economic, and cultural spheres. But despite their intellectual prowess and public contributions, the Jesuits remained a deeply secretive and enigmatic force. The true extent of their power, particularly the influence of the Black Pope, remained largely hidden from public view. The superior general, though technically the head of a religious order, wielded authority that transcended the spiritual realm. His network of influence stretched into the highest reaches of global finance, media, and politics. Through their global network, the Jesuits maintained a degree of power that most would find difficult to comprehend, operating in the shadows, shaping global events without ever stepping into the public eye. The figure of the Black Pope, the hidden leader of the Jesuit order, became an almost mythic symbol of this influence. The Black Pope's power was not derived from the traditional trappings of political authority or religious office, but from his ability to manipulate the levers of power from behind the scenes. As the head of the Jesuit order, he had access to an unrivaled network of intellects, politicians, and financiers, many of whom were either former Jesuit students or had been influenced by Jesuit teachings. His influence stretched far beyond the Vatican, affecting decisions that shaped the political and social landscape of the modern world. The true extent of his power remained, and still remains, largely invisible. A shadowy force working in the background, rarely seen but ever present. In the modern world, the Jesuits have adapted to the changing landscape, continuing to exert their influence in ways that are often concealed from public view. Their role in global politics, education, and media is as potent as ever, and their presence is felt in the most significant events of our time. The Black Pope, though largely a hidden figure, continues to be a symbol of this quiet, powerful influence. The Jesuit order, through its educational institutions, political strategies, and intellectual influence, has become a central force in the shaping of the modern world. And as long as the Jesuits continue to operate, the history of the Catholic Church is littered with moments of power shifts, crises, and moments of intense intrigue. Among these, the relationship between the papacy and the Jesuit order stands out as one of the most complex and consequential. While the visible pope has always held ultimate authority over religious matters, It is the Jesuits, and particularly the head of their order, the so-called Black Pope, who have often held a secretive and far-reaching influence over the Vatican's most critical decisions. The term Black Pope may seem mysterious and ominous, but it refers not to any sinister plot or individual but to the Superior General of the Society of Jesus, a position that wields an enormous degree of power, albeit in a covert manner. The relationship between the Pope and the Black Pope has been one of both cooperation and tension, often playing out behind the closed doors of the Vatican. This tension speaks to the broader power dynamics at play within the Church, where spiritual authority and political power are frequently intertwined. At the heart of this dynamic lies a fundamental question. What is the true nature of the power wielded by the Jesuit order? On the surface, the Jesuits appear to be a religious order devoted to education, missionary work, and the defense of Catholic orthodoxy. They are revered for their intellectual contributions and their ability to adapt to the ever-changing needs of the Catholic Church. But beneath the surface, the Jesuits represent something more. Their influence extends far beyond the walls of the Church. It spans continents, shaping political ideologies, global policies, and even the very way that the modern world views religion, education, and governance. The story of the Jesuits' growing influence within the Church begins with their founding by Ignatius of Loyola in the 16th century. Loyola's vision for the Jesuit order was radical. A new kind of religious society that was not bound by the traditional monastic rules of seclusion and quiet contemplation but one that would actively engage with the world. Unlike other religious orders of the time, the Jesuits were founded with the specific goal of defending and promoting the Catholic faith in the face of Protestant reformations and the religious upheavals that had taken hold in Europe. This meant that the Jesuits' mission was as much political as it was spiritual. They quickly became the Pope's most loyal soldiers, navigating the intricacies of European courts and acting as key figures in the defense of the Catholic Church against the Protestant threat. But their influence did not end there. As the Jesuit order grew, it began to take on more than just a military and educational role. They became heavily involved in political affairs, both within the Vatican and beyond its walls. Their education system produced generations of influential political and intellectual leaders, many of whom owed their rise to positions of power to their Jesuit training. The Jesuits' unparalleled success in education allowed them to embed themselves deeply in the power structures of Europe, where they helped to shape the minds of future kings, politicians, and scholars. They didn't just teach Catholic doctrine. They taught the elite how to navigate the complex political landscapes of Europe, offering their services as advisors to kings and queens, diplomats to empires, and counselors to the highest-ranking members of society. It was during these formative years that the Jesuit order developed a deep, strategic relationship with the papacy. While the Pope was the spiritual leader of the Catholic Church, the Jesuits operated as a kind of invisible government within the Vatican. Their influence felt in nearly every decision, from the selection of cardinals to the drafting of papal encyclicals. The Jesuits' superior education and tactical acumen made them key players not just in religious affairs but in the political maneuvering that often accompanied major decisions within the Church. In this way, the Black Pope, as the head of the Jesuits, began to hold a unique and significant role in shaping the course of both Catholic doctrine and secular affairs. But as the Jesuits' influence within the Vatican grew, so did the tension with the papacy. The role of the Black Pope, a figure often operating behind the scenes, was seen by some as a direct challenge to the authority of the visible Pope. The Jesuits' ability to influence the selection of cardinals, manipulate the choices of bishops, and even sway decisions made by the Pope himself was not lost on those within the Vatican. Some even feared that the Jesuits were building a power structure that might one day rival or even surpass the papacy itself. In this sense, the relationship between the Pope and the Black Pope was not always one of harmony, but one of cautious cooperation and occasional conflict. The Black Pope was a figure of incredible influence, but his role within the Church was a delicate one, balancing the needs of the Jesuit order with the authority of the papacy. The tension between the papacy and the Jesuit order reached a fever pitch during the 18th century. The growing political influence of the Jesuits, particularly their involvement in the courts of European monarchs, made them the target of widespread criticism. Many European monarchs, who saw the Jesuits as a threat to their own power, called for their expulsion from their territories. The Jesuits were accused of manipulating political systems, acting as spies for the Vatican, and exerting undue influence over the decisions of kings and rulers. The Jesuits' growing power outside the Vatican, coupled with their ability to influence religious and political matters within it, caused unease among the European elites. This culminated in the formal suppression of the Jesuit order by Pope Clement XIV in 1773, which was, in essence, an attempt by the papacy to reassert control over the Church and curb the growing power of the Jesuits. The expulsion of the Jesuits was a dramatic moment in the history of the Catholic Church. For a time, the Jesuits were disbanded, their schools and missions closed, and their members dispersed across the globe. The Black Pope, once the undisputed head of a global network of influence, found himself sidelined and his order effectively erased from the official structures of the Vatican. This was a humiliating defeat for the Jesuits, but it was not the end of their story. Though they had been suppressed by the papacy, their influence continued to persist, albeit in a more covert form. In the years following their suppression, Jesuit members worked in secret, continuing their education and missionary work on the margins of society. By the early 19th century, the Jesuit order was officially restored by Pope Pius VII, and with their return, they quickly regained their previous influence within the Church. The Black Pope, once relegated to the shadows, was now reinstated as the leader of one of the most powerful religious orders in the world. However, the restoration of the Jesuits did not mark a return to their earlier position of unchecked power. The world had changed, and so had the relationship between the papacy and the Jesuit order. The new political landscape of the 19th century required the Jesuits to adapt to a more modern, secular world, and as they did, they recalibrated their relationship with the Vatican. The Black Pope's role was no longer just about controlling the inner workings of the Church, but also about navigating the new political realities of Europe and beyond. The modern era has seen the Jesuit order become increasingly involved in global education, missionary work, and social justice efforts. Jesuit-run institutions, from schools to universities to hospitals, have become some of the most respected in the world, and the order's influence on intellectual and social thought remains profound. However, the political nature of the Jesuits has not disappeared. In the 20th century, as global conflicts and ideologies emerged, the Jesuits' influence again extended into the political arena. Their commitment to social justice, human rights, and peacemaking has positioned them as moral voices in some of the world's most complex and dangerous conflicts. Through their vast network of institutions and their ability to mobilize resources and influence public opinion, the Jesuits continue to play a pivotal role in shaping global policies and attitudes. The relationship between the papacy and the Black Pope remains as important as ever in the modern world. While the papacy holds ultimate spiritual authority, it is often the Black Pope who wields significant influence behind the scenes, shaping both the religious and political landscapes of the Catholic Church. His power is not derived from the traditional trappings of papal authority, such as the tiara or the ring of office, but from his control over the vast network of Jesuit institutions and his ability to manipulate global events. The Black Pope is, in many ways, the quiet architect of the modern Catholic Church, exerting influence over everything from the selection of bishops and cardinals to the formation of the Church's stance on social and political issues. This dynamic between the Pope and the Black Pope speaks to the larger themes of power, control, and influence within the Church. The papacy may represent the visible face of the Catholic Church, but the Jesuit order, with its deep roots in education, diplomacy, and politics, remains an invisible yet ever-present force. The Black Pope is not just a figurehead. He is a master of strategy and influence, guiding the course of history from behind the scenes. The true nature of his power may never be fully understood, but one thing is certain: the Jesuit order, with its complex relationship with the papacy, continues to shape the course of the Catholic Church and the broader world in ways that few can fully grasp. Through education, diplomacy, and political maneuvering, the Black Pope remains one of the most enigmatic and powerful figures within the Church, and his influence is felt not just in Rome but across the globe. The narrative surrounding the Jesuit order and the influence of the so-called Black Pope is complex, interwoven with themes of power, secrecy, and the manipulation of global events. It is a story not simply of religion but of how the Jesuits, through their strategic positioning within the Catholic Church and beyond, have been able to shape political landscapes and influence the trajectory of history in subtle yet profound ways. From the very beginnings of the order, the Jesuits have stood at the crossroads of faith and power, walking a line between spiritual devotion and worldly influence. But perhaps what makes the story of the Black Pope truly intriguing is the way in which the order has operated in the shadows, exerting immense influence while maintaining an air of mystery and anonymity. The history of the Jesuits is marked by a singular and unyielding focus on obedience. Ignatius of Loyola, their founder, was not only a religious visionary, but also a military man who understood the importance of discipline, structure, and unwavering loyalty to the mission. The order's earliest members were bound by the strictest vows, committing themselves to total obedience not only to God but to one another and, crucially, to the superior general, the leader of the Jesuit order. It is this model of obedience, coupled with a highly structured hierarchy, that allowed the Jesuits to become so effective and influential. Their education system, rigorous and intellectual, trained not just priests but future leaders, both spiritual and secular. The Jesuit school system became a global network, creating a foundation for the order's far-reaching influence. What made the Jesuits so unique was not just their theological education but their political education. They produced not only theologians but diplomats, philosophers, scientists, and military strategists who would go on to wield power in the most influential courts of Europe and the Americas. The rise of the Jesuits as an intellectual and political force was not merely coincidental. It was a deliberate effort to ensure that the Catholic Church remained a dominant force in the wake of the Protestant Reformation. Ignatius of Loyola's vision for the order was to create a group of men who would be highly educated, highly disciplined, and able to act decisively in the face of challenges. The Jesuits did not just seek to defend the faith. They sought to transform the world, to use their knowledge and influence to reshape society in accordance with Catholic doctrine. In this sense, the Jesuit order was as much about the manipulation of power structures as it was about religious devotion. The creation of this intellectual elite, poised to advise kings and emperors, to educate the youth of Europe, and to penetrate the political systems of the New World, set the stage for the Jesuits to become a force that would challenge the very nature of political and religious authority. As the Jesuits expanded across Europe and into the colonies, their influence continued to grow. Their global reach extended from Europe to Asia, from Africa to the Americas, as they worked tirelessly to spread the Catholic faith. In the Americas, particularly in places like Paraguay and Brazil, Jesuit missionaries built powerful and self-sustaining communities that both preached Catholicism and offered protection from the exploitation of native populations by colonial authorities. These Jesuit reductions were not just places of religious conversion. They were political entities that operated with a degree of autonomy from the colonial government. This created significant tension, as Jesuit power often rivaled that of the colonial rulers themselves. In the late 17th and early 18th centuries, these autonomous missions became targets for both the Spanish and Portuguese empires, who saw the Jesuits as a political challenge to their authority. The expulsion of the Jesuits from South America in the 18th century was as much a political maneuver as it was a religious one, and it highlighted the growing influence the Jesuits had gained in the region. While the Jesuits were consolidating their power in the Americas, they were also establishing themselves as formidable political players in Europe. The order's ability to navigate the complex political realities of the time was unmatched. They were not just educators. They were advisors to monarchs, diplomats in foreign courts, and tacticians in military conflicts. The Jesuits became deeply embedded in the power structures of Europe, offering counsel on everything from domestic policy to international relations. Their intellectual influence was seen in the universities they founded and in the political decisions made in the courts of Europe. Their most prominent intellectuals and philosophers, men like Francisco Suarez and Matteo Ricci, shaped not just Catholic thought but broader European intellectual trends. The Jesuits' educational philosophy, rooted in the principles of humanism, encouraged critical thinking, intellectual rigor, and engagement with the wider world. It was an education that prepared individuals to become leaders not just in the church but in politics, law, and economics. In the courts of European monarchs, the Jesuits became indispensable advisors, shaping the decisions of kings and queens. It was said that Jesuit-trained diplomats were among the most astute in the world, capable of negotiating treaties, forming alliances, and navigating the turbulent politics of the time. It is no surprise that the Jesuit order, though primarily religious in its foundation, became so deeply entwined in the political fabric of Europe and beyond. They were the architects of a new kind of power, one that was intellectual, political, and spiritual, operating seamlessly across these domains. However, with the increasing power and influence of the Jesuits came increasing suspicion. Their political acumen and widespread connections made them the subject of envy and fear. Monarchs, who had once welcomed their advice, began to see the Jesuits as a threat to their own authority. The Jesuits were accused of manipulating political events to their advantage, and their influence over the minds of Europe's elite led many to fear that they were building a secret, shadowy network that could one day undermine the established order. The Jesuit education system, which had produced so many influential leaders, became a point of contention. It was rumored that the Jesuits were using their influence to shape governments and control international policy, and these rumors grew louder as the order's reach expanded. The relationship between the Jesuits and the Catholic Church, particularly the papacy, became increasingly strained. The very power that had made the Jesuits an indispensable force within the Church also made them a challenge to papal authority. The Pope, while nominally the head of the Catholic Church, often found himself competing with the Jesuits for influence and control. The rise of the Jesuit order had created a situation in which the Black Pope, the superior general, wielded immense power, often quietly directing the course of the Church's decisions. For many popes, this was an uncomfortable situation. They found themselves unable to openly challenge the Jesuits without risking alienating their most powerful allies within the Church. The Jesuits, with their vast network of influence, both within the Vatican and beyond, had created a power structure that threatened to overshadow the authority of the Pope himself. The tension between the Pope and the Jesuits came to a head in the 18th century, when the growing power of the Jesuit order led to its suppression by Pope Clement XIV in 1773. The suppression of the Jesuits was a direct response to the political threat they posed to the established order. The expulsion was not simply a religious decision but a political one, driven by the fear that the Jesuits were gaining too much power and influence. The Jesuits were banned in most Catholic countries, their properties confiscated, and their missions dismantled. The Black Pope, once the leader of the most powerful religious order in the world, was effectively sidelined. For the Jesuits, this was a moment of profound crisis. Their network of influence was disrupted, and their members were scattered. But the order did not vanish. The Jesuits, ever resourceful, found ways to continue their work in secret, continuing to shape the world through their clandestine networks. The suppression of the Jesuits was, however, short-lived. In the 19th century, the order was reinstated by Pope Pius VII, who recognized the value of the Jesuits in the wake of the political turmoil that had followed their expulsion. Their return to power marked the beginning of a new phase in the history of the Jesuit order. While their influence was never as overt as it had been before, the Jesuits quickly re-established themselves in the Catholic Church and beyond. Their educational institutions, which had been temporarily closed, were reopened, and their missionary work resumed. They once again became a central force in the political and intellectual spheres, their network of influence stretching across the globe. The Black Pope, though operating behind the scenes, regained his position as the head of one of the most powerful religious orders in the world. In the modern era, the Jesuits continue to be a force of great influence. While their role in global politics has become less overt, their power is no less real. Jesuit-run universities, hospitals, and schools are some of the most prestigious in the world, and their intellectual contributions remain vital to the Catholic Church and to global thought. The Black Pope, though largely invisible to the public eye, remains a central figure within the Catholic Church, guiding the direction of the Jesuit order and, by extension, the global Catholic network. His influence is still felt in the decisions made by the Vatican, the political realities of the Church, and the broader world. The Jesuits' ability to navigate the complex political and religious landscapes of the world has ensured that they remain one of the most powerful forces in global history. From their early days as soldiers of faith to their modern role as global intellectuals and strategists, the Jesuits have continued to shape the world in ways both visible and hidden. Their ability to wield power without drawing attention to themselves is a testament to their enduring influence. The Black Pope, as the leader of this global network, is more than just a figurehead. He is the master of a vast and intricate web of influence, controlling the course of events in ways that remain. The story of the Jesuit order is a paradox, wrapped in mystery and power. At its core, the Jesuits have always been driven by a deep sense of religious commitment and a desire to serve the Catholic Church, but their journey throughout history has often involved striking a delicate balance between their spiritual mission and the pursuit of worldly influence. The figure of the Black Pope symbolizes this duality, a leader of a religious order, yet one whose influence often transcends the purely spiritual. For centuries, the Jesuits have existed in the shadows of the Church, quietly pulling the strings of global politics, education, and diplomacy, all while maintaining an appearance of humility and piety. This paradox, however, is not merely a consequence of their secretive nature, but a deliberate and calculated approach to navigating the complexities of power in the modern world. To understand the influence of the Black Pope, we must first examine the broader historical context that has allowed the Jesuits to grow from a small religious order into one of the most powerful, enigmatic forces in history. The foundation of the Society of Jesus was laid in 1540 when Pope Paul III granted Ignatius of Loyola and his companions official recognition. What began as a relatively small group of men, united in their devotion to spreading the Catholic faith and countering the growing influence of Protestantism, quickly evolved into a global organization with far-reaching impact. Ignatius, a former soldier who experienced a profound spiritual conversion, believed that the Catholic Church needed an elite group of men who would be highly trained, intellectually rigorous, and, most importantly, ready to serve the Church in any capacity required. The Society of Jesus was to be a new kind of religious order, one that was neither strictly monastic nor completely isolated from the world. Instead, the Jesuits were meant to engage with the world, to be on the front lines of religious and intellectual warfare, fighting not with swords but with education, diplomacy, and an understanding of the shifting tides of history. The early Jesuits became known for their remarkable intellectual discipline and their ability to adapt to the demands of the time. Their educational system was one of the most sophisticated in Europe, and it became the cornerstone of their strategy for spreading Catholic influence. Jesuit-run schools and universities produced some of the brightest minds of the era, men who would go on to occupy key positions in both the Church and the state. The order's ability to train future political leaders, diplomats, and military figures gave them unparalleled access to the centers of power in Europe and beyond. Through education, the Jesuits subtly shaped the worldview of many of Europe's most influential individuals, creating a network of like-minded people who shared a commitment to Catholic orthodoxy and, increasingly, to the political and social order that supported it. This network, both intellectual and political, laid the groundwork for the Jesuits' far-reaching influence, but it also made them a target for those who feared the growing power of the order. Over time, the Jesuits became involved in more than just education and religious missions. Their reach expanded into diplomacy, and they became crucial players in the political affairs of Europe and the New World. Their ability to navigate the complexities of European politics, court intrigues, and international diplomacy allowed them to secure a position of immense influence. They advised kings and queens, mediated between warring factions, and provided counsel on matters ranging from economics to military strategy. The Jesuits were not just spiritual leaders, they were key players in the world of statecraft, often holding positions of power behind the scenes. This raised questions about the nature of their influence and the extent to which they might be shaping global events in ways that were not immediately apparent. Their critics, both within and outside the Church, began to view them as a secretive force, operating with an agenda that went beyond the boundaries of religious duty. The concept of the Black Pope emerged as a result of the Jesuits' growing influence. While the visible Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, was considered the spiritual leader of all Catholics, the Jesuit Superior General, the Black Pope, was seen as the true power behind the scenes. The title itself was not official, but it quickly became a symbol of the immense, almost shadowy power wielded by the head of the Jesuit order. Unlike the Pope, who was bound by the ecclesiastical hierarchy and the public eye, the Black Pope operated with a degree of freedom and discretion that allowed him to shape events without the same level of scrutiny. His role was not simply to lead the Jesuit order but to guide and protect the order's broader political, intellectual, and missionary activities. This secretive power structure, with the Black Pope at its helm, was often the subject of suspicion and intrigue, as it was not always clear where the influence of the Jesuits ended and the authority of the Pope began. The growing influence of the Jesuits was not without its detractors. As their power and reach expanded, so did the fear of their enemies. The political and religious elite who felt threatened by the Jesuits' ability to manipulate events from behind the scenes began to rally against them. In the 18th century, the Jesuits found themselves at odds with a number of European monarchs who saw the order as a challenge to their own authority. Kings in France, Spain, and Portugal began to view the Jesuits not as allies but as rivals who held too much influence over their governments and the Catholic Church itself. The expulsion of the Jesuits from various countries was not just a religious matter. It was a political maneuver aimed at curbing their growing power. The Jesuit suppression in 1773 by Pope Clement XIV was a direct response to these political pressures. In many ways, it marked the high point of the tension between the papacy and the Jesuit order. The Jesuits, who had once been the Pope's most trusted soldiers in the battle against Protestantism, were now seen as a threat to the very authority of the papacy itself. Despite the suppression, the Jesuit order did not disappear. In fact, it became even more resilient. While the formal organization was dissolved, many Jesuits continued their work in secret, operating under different names and in different guises. Their intellectual and political influence remained intact, and they found new ways to continue their educational and missionary work. It was a testament to the strength and adaptability of the Jesuit order that, despite being disbanded, they were able to continue to shape the course of history, albeit in a less overt way. Their return in 1814, when Pope Pius VII reinstated the order, was a significant moment in the history of the Jesuits. The order was restored to its former position of influence within the Catholic Church, but the political landscape had changed, and the Jesuits had learned valuable lessons during their time in exile. They were now more cautious, operating with a greater sense of discretion and understanding of the political currents that surrounded them. The Jesuits' return to power in the 19th century marked the beginning of a new phase in their history. While they no longer wielded the same overt political power they once had, they continued to exert significant influence through their educational and missionary activities. Jesuit-run universities and schools became some of the most respected in the world, and the order's intellectual contributions were felt far beyond the Catholic Church. The Black Pope, although not in the same public role as the Pope, remained a central figure in the Jesuit order, guiding its direction and maintaining its vast global network. The Jesuits were no longer just educators and missionaries. They were also engaged in the global conversation on social justice, human rights, and peace, advocating for causes that aligned with Catholic teachings while maintaining their own distinctive voice in the public sphere. In the modern era, the Jesuits have continued to adapt to the changing political and social landscape. While their role in global politics has become less direct, their influence remains significant. Jesuit-run universities, hospitals, and social justice organizations continue to have a profound impact on global education and policy. The Jesuit commitment to education and intellectual engagement remains at the heart of their mission, and their ability to shape the minds of future leaders continues to be one of their most powerful tools. The Black Pope, while operating in the shadows, remains a central figure in the Jesuit order, guiding its work and ensuring that the order's influence is felt around the world. The Jesuits' ability to shape history, both through their intellectual contributions and their political engagement, has cemented their place as one of the most powerful religious orders in history. The Black Pope, though never officially recognized as a political leader, continues to wield significant influence, shaping the course of events from behind the scenes. His role is not just that of a religious leader but of a strategist, a diplomat, and a political player who understands the intricate web of power that connects the religious, intellectual, and political spheres. Through their education system, their political maneuvering, and their global network, the Jesuits have created a legacy that continues to shape the modern world. And as the Black Pope quietly guides the Jesuit order into the future, one can only wonder how deep their influence truly runs, and how far their reach extends in the shaping of global events. The Jesuit order's survival and continued influence, even after their suppression in the 18th century, speak to the remarkable resilience and adaptability of both the organization and its leadership. The suppression, which had aimed to dismantle the order's power both inside the Vatican and within Europe's political and social structures, ended up reinforcing a critical component of the Jesuit ethos: perseverance in the face of adversity. Though officially expelled, the Jesuits were not defeated. Their ability to survive and continue their influence in the face of the harshest opposition highlights an essential aspect of their character: the ability to rebuild, reassert themselves, and quietly, but firmly, continue to guide the course of history. The expulsion of the Jesuits from Europe was not a simple religious matter. It had deep political roots. The Jesuit order had made powerful enemies, particularly among the monarchies of Europe, who viewed the Jesuits' influence as a direct challenge to their own political authority. Kings such as Louis XV of France, Charles III of Spain, and Joseph II of Austria felt threatened by the order's ability to sway public opinion, control education, and subtly influence political decisions within their realms. The Jesuits were perceived as a powerful, insular force that operated within royal courts and among the highest ranks of political leadership. For these rulers, the Jesuits' ability to forge networks across countries and continents, all while remaining largely invisible to the general public, became an intolerable challenge to their own control. However, the power of the Jesuit order was never merely political. It was rooted in the order's intellectual and religious mission. The Jesuits had long been more than just missionaries. They were educators, philosophers, and theologians whose ideas and teachings had a profound impact on the world. They were at the forefront of Catholic intellectual movements, and their commitment to education, often in the form of their vast network of schools and universities, allowed them to imprint their ideals on generations of leaders and thinkers. The educational system that the Jesuits developed became a powerful tool not just for spreading Catholic doctrine but for shaping the broader cultural, political, and intellectual landscapes of Europe. They were a force that, through their schools, universities, and missions, indirectly held sway over the political landscape, ensuring that the Catholic worldview continued to shape the next generation of rulers, scholars, and clergy. After the suppression in 1773, many Jesuits found refuge in countries where they could continue their mission without the same interference from monarchs who had expelled them. In places like Russia, Prussia, and the Americas, they maintained their schools, offering a deep intellectual education that would later play a role in rebuilding the network of influence that had been temporarily lost. By the time of their restoration by Pope Pius VII in 1814, the Jesuits had re-established themselves, not just as a religious order but as a highly influential intellectual force. The Jesuits were able to capitalize on the political changes occurring in the wake of the Napoleonic Wars and the dissolution of the old European order. They became key figures in the rebuilding of post-revolutionary Europe, offering both intellectual and religious leadership during a time of political upheaval. One of the most significant aspects of the Jesuit restoration was their focus on education and intellectual rigor. With the return of the Jesuits, Pope Pius VII recognized the need for a renewed emphasis on Catholic education, both in terms of religious instruction and the broader educational framework that could shape the minds of Europe's new leaders. The Jesuits' return to the educational sphere allowed them to regain some of their former power by shaping the minds of Catholic youth and cultivating the next generation of political leaders, intellectuals, and clergy. The restoration of the Jesuit order helped to ensure that the Catholic Church remained a central force in European and global affairs, despite the rise of secularism and nationalism in the 19th century. This educational mission would define the Jesuits' future role in global politics. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the Jesuits expanded their network of schools and universities, many of which would go on to become some of the most prestigious institutions of higher learning in the world. From the United States to South America, Africa to Asia, Jesuit educational institutions continued to serve as hubs for the intellectual and political elite. They became places where future leaders in politics, business, and religion were formed, all influenced by Jesuit ideals. The Jesuits' ability to shape the intellectual climate, particularly through their educational institutions, allowed them to wield influence quietly, without the need for direct political involvement. It is said that many political leaders, scholars, and diplomats were educated in Jesuit institutions, carrying with them the teachings and values of the order into the halls of power. The quiet power of the Jesuit order, and the role of the Black Pope as the figurehead of that power, should not be underestimated. Though the Black Pope is not as publicly visible as the Pope himself, His influence is far-reaching, particularly within the political and intellectual circles that the Jesuits have cultivated. The Black Pope's role, as the head of the Jesuit order, is to guide the order's mission while navigating the complex, and often treacherous, world of politics, diplomacy, and global affairs. Much of the Black Pope's power is exercised behind the scenes, but his influence is felt in the way the Jesuit order shapes global events, educates future leaders, and positions itself in the midst of the most significant political issues of the day. The Jesuits, through the actions and leadership of the Black Pope, have often found themselves at the center of global movements, whether it be in the realm of social justice, education, or even conflict resolution. The Jesuit commitment to social justice, particularly in the 20th century, brought them into close engagement with global issues, including poverty, inequality, and human rights. Their influence was particularly evident in Latin America, where Jesuit priests became deeply involved in advocating for the rights of the oppressed and marginalized. Their commitment to the poor and their active role in social movements made them central figures in the politics of Latin America, where the Jesuits' work would often clash with authoritarian regimes and oppressive powers. The Black Pope, in many ways, was the guiding force behind this Jesuit involvement in global political issues, shaping the order's mission to align with the social justice movements of the 20th century. The Jesuits' focus on social justice, however, was not without controversy. In some circles, they were accused of being too politically involved, particularly during the years of political upheaval in Latin America. The Jesuit order's engagement in politics and their support for revolutionary movements often led to tension with both conservative Catholic factions and secular governments, who viewed the Jesuits' actions as radical or subversive. But this engagement with political causes, particularly their alignment with the oppressed, speaks to the larger purpose of the Jesuit order, to be in the world but not of the world. The Jesuits believed that true faith was not just a private matter but something that could and should engage with the world's deepest injustices. The Black Pope's role in guiding this mission has always been one of quiet, behind-the-scenes influence. The leader of the Jesuit order does not act as a political figure in the conventional sense, but rather as a guide, offering direction to a vast global network that seeks to influence society, politics, and culture through education, intellectual thought, and social action. The power of the Black Pope lies in his ability to direct the global Jesuit network in ways that are both subtle and profound, ensuring that the order continues to exert influence over the shaping of global events, even as it avoids the overt trappings of political leadership. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, the Jesuit order's commitment to education and social justice continued to be a driving force in its global presence. The order's network of universities, schools, and hospitals not only educated millions of students but also served as platforms for the dissemination of ideas that aligned with Catholic teachings, intellectual rigor, and social activism. The Black Pope, though not a figure in the public eye, remains the spiritual and intellectual leader of an order that continues to shape the world in ways that few realize. Today, the Jesuit order is as influential as ever, with thousands of institutions around the world, including some of the most respected universities in the United States, Europe, and Latin America. The order has continued to attract individuals who are interested in the intersection of faith, intellect, and social responsibility. The Black Pope, though far removed from the limelight, still holds considerable power within the Church and within global circles of influence, quietly directing the course of the Jesuit order and ensuring its continued impact on the world stage. Through their intellectual pursuits, their social activism, and their global network of influence, the Jesuits, and the Black Pope in particular, remain a quiet but powerful force in shaping the world. Their legacy, built on resilience, intellectual rigor, and a commitment to justice, continues to unfold, guiding the next generation of leaders, educators, and changemakers who will leave their mark on history. The Jesuits have proven time and again that their influence is not bound by time, geography, or political upheaval. Instead, it endures, adapting to the needs of the moment while remaining grounded in their original mission of serving both God and humanity. The Black Pope, as the head of this global movement, is the quiet force behind a legacy that continues to shape the future. The Jesuit order, with its deep and often mysterious influence on global affairs, is a testament to the remarkable resilience and strategic foresight of its leadership. At the heart of this influence is the role of the Black Pope, a figure often shrouded in intrigue and speculation. While the title itself evokes images of shadowy political maneuvering, the actual role of the superior general of the Society of Jesus, the Black Pope, is far more complex, nuanced, and grounded in the order's history of intellectual rigor, social commitment, and religious devotion. However, it is precisely this balance of intellect and power that has allowed the Jesuits to maintain such a lasting impact on world events, often operating with a quiet but pervasive influence behind the scenes. To truly understand the power of the Black Pope, it is essential to explore the multifaceted ways in which the Jesuits have intertwined their religious mission with their intellectual, political, and social endeavors. Their influence, though subtle, continues to shape the world in ways that are often invisible to the broader public. The Jesuit commitment to education has long been a cornerstone of their global strategy. From their earliest days, the Jesuits placed a high value on intellectual formation. Their educational philosophy, grounded in the classical tradition, was designed not only to produce men of faith, but also to develop thinkers capable of engaging with the world. Jesuit schools and universities became some of the most prestigious and influential in Europe, and over time, the Jesuits expanded their educational network across the globe. What set Jesuit education apart was not only its emphasis on intellectual rigor, but its focus on forming individuals who could influence society in profound ways. Jesuit-trained individuals were often placed in key political, intellectual, and religious positions, ensuring that the Jesuit worldview, one that balanced faith with reason, devotion with worldly engagement, would continue to have a lasting impact. One of the most powerful aspects of Jesuit education was its ability to foster leaders who could navigate the complex political landscapes of Europe, the Americas, and beyond. Jesuit-trained individuals were not just equipped to serve in religious capacities. They were prepared to lead in the secular world as well. This dual focus on religious and intellectual formation meant that Jesuits could become powerful figures within both the Catholic Church and the broader political realm. The Black Pope, as the leader of this vast educational network, understood the power of shaping the minds of future leaders. Through the Jesuits' global network of schools and universities, the order created a steady stream of individuals who could shape the course of history. The Black Pope, in his capacity as superior general, became the guiding force behind this intellectual empire, directing the flow of ideas and ensuring that the Jesuit worldview continued to thrive. Beyond education, the Jesuit order has also been a force for political and social change. The order's commitment to social justice, particularly in the 20th century, became one of its defining characteristics. Jesuits around the world took up the cause of the poor, the oppressed, and the marginalized, advocating for systemic change in countries across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. The Jesuits' engagement with social justice issues was not just about charity or humanitarian work. It was about challenging the structures of power and inequality that perpetuated poverty and injustice. This commitment to social justice put the Jesuits at odds with both secular governments and conservative factions within the Church, particularly during periods of political turmoil in Latin America. In many cases, Jesuit priests and theologians were at the forefront of movements advocating for the rights of the poor, often at great personal risk. The Black Pope, although not directly involved in day-to-day political activism, played a key role in guiding the order's approach to these issues. His leadership ensured that the Jesuits remained true to their mission of social responsibility while navigating the delicate balance between religious devotion and political engagement. The Jesuits' focus on social justice also extended to their work with indigenous populations. In the Americas, particularly in regions like Paraguay, the Jesuits established missions that were not only centers of religious conversion but also communities that provided protection from the exploitation of native peoples by European colonists. These Jesuit reductions were remarkable for their organization and self-sufficiency, as well as their commitment to social justice. The Jesuits worked to create a sense of community and autonomy for indigenous people, providing them with education, healthcare, and spiritual guidance, all while resisting the pressures of colonial exploitation. This work was often met with resistance from colonial governments and other European powers, who viewed the Jesuits' influence as a threat to their authority. The Black Pope, as the head of the order, was instrumental in guiding the Jesuits' work in these areas, ensuring that the order remained committed to its mission of social justice, even in the face of political opposition. The Jesuits' engagement with politics and social issues, however, has not always been without controversy. At various points in history, the order has faced accusations of political manipulation and subversion. The Jesuits' ability to move in and out of political circles, their close relationships with European monarchs and other powerful figures, and their reputation for strategic thinking and diplomatic skill led some to view them as a secretive force, acting behind the scenes to shape the course of events. The title Black Pope itself evokes a sense of intrigue and suspicion, suggesting a figure who operates in the shadows, pulling the strings of power from behind the scenes. However, while the Black Pope undoubtedly wields significant influence within the Jesuit order and beyond, his power is often exercised with a careful understanding of the political realities of the time. The Black Pope's role is not to act as a political leader in the traditional sense, but rather to guide the order in its mission, ensuring that the Jesuits continue to have an impact on global events while remaining true to their religious and intellectual values. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Black Pope's power is his ability to navigate the delicate relationship between the Jesuit order and the Vatican. While the Jesuits are, of course, a Catholic order and ultimately answer to the Pope, the Superior General, the Black Pope holds a unique position within the Church. The Jesuit order, with its vast network of schools, universities, and political influence, often operates with a degree of autonomy that can place it at odds with the traditional power structures within the Church. The Black Pope, therefore, must balance the interests of the Jesuits with the broader priorities of the Vatican. This delicate balance has often led to tension between the two institutions, particularly when the Jesuits' social justice initiatives or political engagements challenge the status quo. Despite these tensions, however, the Black Pope's role as the head of the Jesuit order remains central to the ongoing influence of the Jesuits within the Catholic Church and the wider world. The Jesuits' commitment to education, social justice, and intellectual engagement has ensured that they remain a central force in shaping global events, even as their role has shifted over time. From their early days as missionaries to their later involvement in political and social movements, the Jesuits have consistently been at the forefront of efforts to shape society in accordance with their values. The Black Pope, as the head of the order, plays a pivotal role in ensuring that the Jesuit mission continues to evolve in response to changing global circumstances. His leadership, though often invisible, ensures that the Jesuits remain a powerful force in the world, shaping the course of history in ways that are often subtle but profound. As the 21st century progresses, the Jesuit order continues to expand its influence in new and innovative ways. The order's commitment to education and social justice remains central to its mission, and the Black Pope, as the spiritual and intellectual leader of the order, continues to guide its direction. The Jesuits' network of universities, schools, and social justice initiatives continues to shape the minds of future leaders, ensuring that the Jesuit worldview, one that balances faith, intellect, and social responsibility, remains a powerful force in the world. Whether through their engagement with global issues such as poverty, inequality, and human rights, or their continued work in education and intellectual discourse, the Jesuits remain a key player on the global stage. The role of the Black Pope, though not one of public visibility, remains essential to the Jesuit mission. His leadership ensures that the Jesuit order continues to adapt to the changing political and social realities of the world, while maintaining its core commitment to the values of faith, intellect, and social responsibility. The Black Pope's influence extends far beyond the confines of the Catholic Church, shaping the course of global events in ways that are often invisible but always profound. The legacy of the Jesuits and the leadership of the Black Pope will continue to unfold, influencing the world for generations to come. The global influence of the Jesuit order, particularly in the modern era, is often subtle yet profound, shaping not only the spiritual but also the intellectual and political landscapes across continents. The modern-day Jesuits, despite their long history of political turbulence and exile, have managed to reassert themselves in ways that defy expectations. Through education, social justice work, and strategic positioning within the highest echelons of global leadership, the Jesuits have once again become a formidable force in the shaping of the contemporary world. What makes the Jesuits so remarkable is not just their ability to bounce back from historical setbacks, but their ability to evolve in the face of changing global realities. The Black Pope, in particular, plays a crucial role in ensuring that the Jesuit order continues to adapt and thrive, even in an age where the balance of power has shifted dramatically and the world is increasingly driven by secular and ideological forces. The re-establishment of the Jesuit order after its suppression in the 18th century marked a new chapter in the history of the Society of Jesus. Following their reinstatement by Pope Pius VII in 1814, the Jesuits emerged from their exile with a renewed sense of purpose and strategy. The early years of the 19th century were a time of great political upheaval across Europe, with the Napoleonic Wars, the rise of nationalism, and the secularization of much of the European continent. Yet, despite these challenges, the Jesuits were able to reassert their intellectual dominance through the establishment of new educational institutions, research centers, and missionary endeavors. This period saw the Jesuits refocus their energies on their core mission of education, which had always been a powerful tool for shaping both Catholic thought and the secular world. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, the Jesuits continued to build a network of prestigious schools and universities across Europe and the Americas, many of which became known as centers of intellectual excellence. The Jesuit educational system, which had already produced great minds during the Renaissance, was revitalized and adapted to the changing needs of modern society. Jesuit-run institutions became some of the most respected in the world, producing future leaders in politics, science, literature, and other fields. These institutions were not only vehicles for transmitting Catholic teachings but also for engaging with the broader intellectual currents of the time, from the Enlightenment to modernism. In this way, the Jesuits were able to influence the intellectual climate of the 19th and 20th centuries while maintaining their strong Catholic identity. The Black Pope, as the spiritual and administrative leader of the Jesuit order, played an essential role in this reinvention. While the public often associated the role of the Black Pope with secrecy and hidden power, the reality was that the Jesuit Superior General was also deeply involved in the intellectual, educational, and social dimensions of the order's work. The Black Pope had to strike a delicate balance between maintaining the autonomy of the Jesuit order and aligning the order's goals with the broader mission of the Catholic Church. His position was unique in that, while not holding the same public visibility as the Pope himself, he wielded a considerable amount of influence behind the scenes, shaping the direction of the Church and influencing global political and social movements through the extensive Jesuit network. In the 20th century, the Jesuits' role in the world continued to grow, particularly through their involvement in social justice and political activism. The Jesuit commitment to social justice has its roots in the order's earliest days, but it became a defining feature of their work in the 20th century, especially during periods of political upheaval in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Jesuit priests and theologians played pivotal roles in advocating for the rights of the oppressed, challenging authoritarian regimes, and pushing for systemic reform in countries where poverty, inequality, and injustice were widespread. This was particularly evident during the era of liberation theology in Latin America, a movement that sought to interpret the teachings of Christ in the context of liberation from economic and political oppression. During the 1960s and 1970s, liberation theology became a hotly debated issue within the Catholic Church. The Jesuits, led by their intellectual rigor and commitment to social justice, became some of the most vocal advocates for the poor and disenfranchised. However, this activism often put the Jesuits at odds with both the church hierarchy and secular governments, particularly in countries like Argentina, Brazil, and El Salvador. Jesuit priests and their lay collaborators were targeted by military juntas and right-wing death squads, resulting in numerous Jesuit martyrs. Perhaps the most famous of these was Archbishop Oscar Romero of El Salvador, who was assassinated for his outspoken defense of the poor. Many Jesuits, particularly in Latin America, viewed their mission as one that went beyond merely providing spiritual guidance. It involved a deep engagement with the social, economic, and political issues of the day. The Black Pope, though not directly involved in the political battles, supported the Jesuit commitment to social justice and helped to ensure that the order remained aligned with the progressive movements that sought to address systemic inequality. The global political influence of the Jesuits did not remain confined to Latin America. In the aftermath of World War II, the Jesuits expanded their reach into Asia and Africa, establishing schools, universities, and social programs that targeted the needs of underprivileged communities. In Asia, the Jesuits engaged with issues of economic development, education, and religious tolerance, often in countries where Catholicism was a minority religion. In Africa, they played an important role in the decolonization process, providing education and support to newly independent nations. The Black Pope's leadership during this period was crucial in ensuring that the Jesuit order remained committed to its founding principles while adapting to the political and cultural realities of the modern world. While the 20th century saw the Jesuits increasingly involved in social justice, education, and political activism, the order has also faced significant challenges in recent years. The rise of secularism, the declining influence of the Catholic Church in many Western countries, and the Church's scandals in the late 20th and early 21st centuries have all created an environment in which the Jesuits must adapt to new realities. Despite these challenges, the Jesuits have continued to thrive. In fact, many argue that their role in contemporary society is more crucial than ever. The Black Pope, as the leader of the order, must navigate these changes with the same adaptability and strategic vision that has characterized the Jesuit leadership throughout history. One of the most significant challenges facing the Jesuit order today is the changing role of religion in public life. The rise of secularism and the increasing pluralism of societies around the world have led to a situation where the influence of religion, particularly the Catholic Church, has been greatly diminished in many regions. In response to these changes, the Jesuits have increasingly focused on interfaith dialogue, global peacebuilding, and addressing contemporary ethical issues. The Jesuit approach to dialogue with other religious traditions, particularly with Islam, Judaism, and Buddhism, has been an important aspect of their work in the modern world. The Black Pope's leadership in this area has emphasized the importance of mutual understanding, peace, and cooperation between different religious and cultural communities. At the same time, the Jesuits have continued to maintain their educational commitment, particularly through the hundreds of schools, universities, and research centers they have established across the globe. These institutions continue to be some of the most respected in the world, shaping future leaders in politics, business, law, and science. The Jesuits' emphasis on intellectual rigor, moral philosophy, and social responsibility has kept their educational institutions at the forefront of academic excellence. The Black Pope, as the spiritual and intellectual leader of the order, ensures that the order remains committed to the high standards of education and ethical values that have always been a hallmark of Jesuit institutions. The role of the Black Pope, however, is not solely about managing the Jesuit order's educational and social activities. His influence extends into the broader workings of the Catholic Church. Although the Black Pope does not have the same authority as the Pope, his position as the head of the Jesuits gives him considerable sway over the direction of the Church, particularly in areas related to education, theology, and social justice. The Jesuit order has historically been at the forefront of theological debates within the Church, and the Black Pope plays a key role in ensuring that the order remains engaged with the most pressing theological issues of the day. The Jesuits have always been known for their intellectual prowess, and the Black Pope's leadership ensures that this tradition continues. Moreover, the Black Pope's influence is also felt in the Jesuit order's relationship with the Vatican. While the Jesuits maintain a degree of independence, their work must always align with the broader goals of the Church. The Black Pope's role is to ensure that the Jesuit order continues to serve the Church while also remaining faithful to its unique mission of education, social justice, and intellectual engagement. The tension between the autonomy of the Jesuit order and the authority of the Vatican has been a long-standing issue, but it is one that the Black Pope navigates with great skill and diplomatic acumen. In conclusion, the Jesuits have managed to survive and thrive in the modern world through a combination of intellectual rigor, social commitment, and a strategic ability to adapt to changing global realities. The Black Pope, as the leader of the Jesuit order, plays an indispensable role in ensuring that the order remains a powerful and influential force in the world. Through their educational work, social justice initiatives, and engagement with the broader intellectual and political landscapes, the Jesuits continue to shape the course of history. The Black Pope's leadership ensures that the Jesuit order stays true to its mission while remaining responsive to the ever-changing world around it. The legacy of the Jesuits, and the ongoing influence of the Black Pope, will undoubtedly continue to shape global affairs for generations to come. The history of the Jesuit order is rich, complex, and in many ways, a reflection of the broader story of the Catholic Church's engagement with the changing currents of world history. While often seen as a quiet, intellectual force working behind the scenes, the Jesuits' influence on world affairs has been profound, extending far beyond the confines of religious mission and education. The Black Pope, as the head of the Jesuit order, plays an integral role in shaping this influence, steering the order through times of great turmoil, adapting to shifting political and social landscapes, and ensuring that its core mission of education, intellectual rigor, and social justice continues to thrive in the modern world. As we look at the Jesuits' influence through the lens of history, it becomes evident that their power is not solely derived from direct political or military engagement but from their ability to adapt, to shape intellectual discourse, and to position themselves strategically within the most influential spheres of global power. The Jesuit order was founded in 1540 by Ignatius of Loyola, a Spanish soldier who experienced a profound spiritual transformation while recovering from a battle wound. His vision for the Society of Jesus was revolutionary in many ways, as he sought to create an order that was not confined by the traditional monastic life. Instead of retreating from the world, the Jesuits were called to engage with it, to fight for the souls of men and women through education, preaching, and diplomacy. This engagement with the world, however, was never about worldly power for its own sake. It was about ensuring that Catholicism remained a dominant force in a rapidly changing religious and political landscape. Ignatius believed that the Church had to be nimble and intellectually robust if it was to fend off the growing influence of Protestantism, which was gaining ground across Europe. The Jesuits were therefore called to become a new kind of religious order, one that was actively engaged in the battle of ideas, intellectual debate, and the reconstruction of Catholic identity. From the outset, the Jesuits became known for their education and missionary work. Jesuit schools and universities became renowned for their academic rigor, and the order soon established a reputation for producing some of the most highly educated individuals of the era. Jesuit-run institutions became breeding grounds for future leaders, not just in the Church but across political, intellectual, and military spheres. They quickly spread their influence throughout Europe, Latin America, Asia, and Africa, establishing a network of schools, colleges, and seminaries that would form the intellectual backbone of the Catholic world. This global network was one of the key mechanisms by which the Jesuits maintained their influence, shaping generations of political, religious, and intellectual leaders who carried the values and perspectives of the Jesuit order with them into the halls of power. However, the Jesuit commitment to intellectual engagement, their active participation in the affairs of states, and their involvement in education placed them at odds with powerful political forces. In the 18th century, the rise of secularism and the power of monarchs in Europe created an environment where the Jesuits' influence was seen as a threat. Kings such as Louis XV of France, Charles III of Spain, and others in Europe began to view the Jesuits as a rival power, a network of influence that was too independent, too far-reaching, and too involved in the political affairs of their states. The Jesuits' influence over education and their ability to direct the minds of Europe's future leaders were viewed with suspicion, particularly by monarchs who sought to centralize their own power and diminish the influence of the Church. The climax of this tension came in 1773 when Pope Clement XIV, under immense political pressure, suppressed the Jesuit order. This suppression, however, would not last forever. The Jesuits, although officially dissolved, were not defeated, and their spirit and influence would rise again in the 19th century. The restoration of the Jesuit order in 1814 by Pope Pius VII marked a new chapter in the history of the Society of Jesus. Following their reinstatement, the Jesuits returned to their global mission with renewed vigor, adapting to the changing political landscape of the 19th century. The rise of nationalism, the spread of revolutionary ideologies, and the changing role of religion in public life all created new challenges for the Jesuits. Yet they faced these challenges with the same intellectual rigor and commitment to education that had characterized their early years. The Jesuits began to focus their efforts not just on educating the children of the elite, but also on engaging with the broader social and political realities of the modern world. This period saw the Jesuits become deeply involved in the emerging social movements of the time, particularly those focused on issues of poverty, justice, and human rights. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the Jesuits played a key role in shaping the educational systems of emerging nations in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. They established schools and universities that were not only centers of intellectual learning, but also forums for political and social engagement. Jesuit educators sought to instill in their students a deep sense of social responsibility, emphasizing the importance of working for justice, equality, and the common good. The Jesuit commitment to social justice became particularly pronounced during the 20th century, especially in the context of Latin America, where the region's social inequalities and political instability led to significant challenges for the Church and the Jesuit order. The most prominent expression of the Jesuits' engagement with social justice came during the period of liberation theology in the 1960s and 1970s. Liberation theology was a movement within the Catholic Church that sought to address the root causes of poverty and injustice by advocating for the rights of the poor and oppressed. Many Jesuit priests and theologians became vocal proponents of this movement, calling for a radical transformation of society that would prioritize the needs of the marginalized. In countries such as Brazil, El Salvador, and Argentina, Jesuit priests became leaders in the struggle for social change, advocating for the rights of workers, indigenous populations, and peasants. However, their involvement in these movements made them targets of political repression. Jesuit priests and their allies were often arrested, tortured, or even killed by military dictatorships, which viewed them as a threat to the status quo. Perhaps the most tragic and well-known example of this was the murder of 6 Jesuit priests in El Salvador in 1989, a crime that was part of the broader campaign of violence against those seeking to bring about social and political change in the region. The commitment of the Jesuits to social justice, despite the personal risks, was a powerful testimony to their understanding of their mission: to engage with the world, to fight for the oppressed, and to seek a more just and equitable society. The Black Pope, though often not directly involved in the specific political movements, played a crucial role in shaping the Jesuit order's response to these challenges. The leadership of the Black Pope has always been marked by an ability to navigate the complex and sometimes dangerous political terrain that the Jesuits operate in. While the Pope is the leader of the Catholic Church and represents its highest spiritual authority, the Black Pope, as the head of the Jesuit order, holds a unique position in terms of his ability to influence both religious and political spheres. The Black Pope's role is not only to guide the Jesuits in their religious and educational activities, but also to ensure that the order continues to adapt to the changing needs of the world, while staying true to its mission of intellectual engagement, social justice, and spiritual devotion. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the role of the Jesuits continued to evolve as they faced new global challenges. The rise of secularism, the erosion of religious authority in the Western world, and the challenges posed by global conflicts required the Jesuits to reconsider their role in the world. The Jesuits' educational institutions, while still widely regarded as among the best in the world, also had to contend with the changing landscape of higher education, particularly in the wake of globalization and technological advancements. The Jesuits' commitment to providing high-quality education remained steadfast, but they also began to place greater emphasis on global issues such as environmental sustainability, economic inequality, and interfaith dialogue. One of the most significant aspects of the Jesuit order's modern-day mission has been its focus on global issues such as climate change, human rights, and the fight against poverty. The Jesuits have become increasingly involved in advocacy and social justice work, particularly through their educational institutions, social outreach programs, and partnerships with non-governmental organizations. The Black Pope's leadership continues to guide the order in this area, ensuring that the Jesuits remain at the forefront of efforts to address the most pressing issues of the contemporary world. In this context, the Jesuit commitment to education, particularly education that is focused on social responsibility and global citizenship, has become more important than ever. Despite the numerous challenges faced by the Jesuits, their ability to adapt and thrive in an ever-changing world speaks to the strength and resilience of the order. The Black Pope, as the spiritual and intellectual leader of the Society of Jesus, continues to guide the order's work in ways that ensure its continued relevance in the modern world. Whether through their commitment to education, social justice, or interfaith dialogue, the Jesuits remain a force for positive change in the world, shaping the future through their intellectual, social, and spiritual contributions. Their legacy, a legacy that stretches back over 500 years, continues to shape the world today, and the Black Pope's leadership ensures that the Jesuit mission will continue to be a source of influence and inspiration for generations to come. The Jesuit order's influence on global affairs in the modern world continues to captivate the imagination of many. Over the centuries, the Society of Jesus has been a force to be reckoned with, its reach and impact far exceeding what many would expect from a religious order. Central to this enduring power is the figure of the Black Pope, the leader of the Jesuits, who has always been seen as one of the most influential and yet enigmatic figures in the Catholic Church. However, to understand the true extent of the Jesuits' influence, it is essential to look at the order's actions in the 20th and 21st centuries. This is a time when global power structures were being transformed, and the Jesuits adapted to these new realities with a deftness that allowed them to continue to thrive, even when their religious influence in traditional ways began to wane. The impact of the Jesuits in the 20th century was shaped by many factors. The two world wars, the rise of communism, decolonization in Africa and Asia, and the increasing secularization of Western societies all created an environment in which the Jesuits had to reimagine their role. What stood out was the ability of the order to maintain its educational and social missions, even in the face of such tremendous political and societal upheaval. The Jesuits, under the leadership of their superior general or Black Pope, continued to place emphasis on the value of education and intellectual engagement, ensuring that they remained relevant in a world that was shifting dramatically in terms of politics, culture, and spirituality. In the aftermath of World War II, the world was in a state of flux. Europe was recovering from the devastation of the war, and new ideologies were emerging. One of the most significant shifts in this period was the rise of communism, which would dominate large parts of the world, particularly in Asia and Eastern Europe. Jesuits, particularly in Latin America, began to engage with the political realities of this new era. Their involvement in the socio-political upheavals of the 20th century was not just about spiritual guidance or religious leadership, but about advocating for social justice. It was a period when Jesuit priests, theologians, and scholars began to critically examine the state of the world and to see their role as agents of change. This is where the role of the Black Pope, as the spiritual and administrative leader of the order, became so crucial. The Black Pope not only had to guide the Jesuits in their spiritual missions but also in their engagement with the ever-changing political landscape. It was this capacity for strategic leadership, one that balanced faith with an acute understanding of worldly realities, that allowed the Jesuits to play such a prominent role in the transformation of the 20th century. One of the most significant movements in the 20th century, which came to define the Jesuit role in the context of social change, was liberation theology. In Latin America, many Jesuits became increasingly involved in social and political movements that aimed at addressing the widespread poverty, inequality, and injustice that were characteristic of the region. It was an era of political repression, authoritarian governments, and military dictatorships, and the Jesuits found themselves not just as witnesses but as active participants in the fight for human rights. While the Catholic Church had long been a conservative institution, many Jesuits began to reinterpret Catholic doctrine to focus on the liberation of the poor and the marginalized. This was a radical departure from traditional teachings, which often emphasized obedience to authority and social hierarchy. The rise of liberation theology in Latin America was seen as a direct challenge to both local governments and the Vatican. Jesuit leaders, including their Black Pope, were often faced with the dilemma of balancing their intellectual engagement with the needs of the poor with their loyalty to the Vatican and the Church's broader mission. The Black Pope's leadership during this period was particularly important. The position of Superior General of the Jesuits is one of immense responsibility, and the political and theological tensions of the 20th century made the role even more complex. Under the leadership of figures like Pedro Arup, the Black Pope had to navigate the increasingly contentious relationship between the Church and the secular forces of the time. Liberation theology, though rooted in a Catholic understanding of justice, was seen by some in the Vatican as dangerously radical, particularly because of its association with Marxist ideologies. The Jesuits, under the leadership of the Black Pope, defended their interpretation of the Gospel, which placed a strong emphasis on human dignity, justice, and equality. Yet, in doing so, they risked drawing the ire of both political leaders and members of the Church hierarchy, who feared that their work would fuel revolutionary movements and undermine the stability of traditional power structures. Despite the tensions, the Jesuits continued their social justice work, even in the face of violent repression. In the 1970s and 1980s, Jesuit priests in countries like El Salvador, Brazil, and Argentina were targeted for assassination by military juntas. Their willingness to speak out against injustices, to advocate for the oppressed, and to align themselves with the struggles of the poor resulted in their becoming martyrs of a kind. Perhaps one of the most tragic moments in the history of the Jesuit order occurred in 1989 when 6 Jesuit priests were murdered in El Salvador, including their housemaid and her daughter. The massacre of these Jesuits, who had dedicated their lives to serving the poor and promoting social justice, was a stark reminder of the dangers that came with such activism. Yet, it also cemented the Jesuits' role as one of the most influential religious forces in the fight for justice and equality. The Black Pope's leadership was critical during this period of great upheaval. Though the Jesuits were widely regarded as a force for intellectual engagement and spiritual guidance, they had also become known as active political agents. Their role in Latin America's struggle for justice made them powerful figures in the social movements of the time. The Black Pope, though not directly involved in the day-to-day activism, had the responsibility of guiding the order through turbulent times. He had to ensure that the Jesuits remained faithful to their mission of social justice while navigating the increasingly complex and dangerous political terrain. The Black Pope's role was not just one of spiritual leadership but also one of political maneuvering, ensuring that the Jesuits' work in Latin America continued even as they faced violent repression. As the 20th century came to a close, the challenges facing the Jesuits did not subside. The collapse of the Soviet Union and the subsequent rise of global capitalism brought about new challenges for the Jesuits, especially in their role as intellectual leaders. The nature of political engagement was changing, and the world was becoming increasingly interconnected. The Jesuits, who had long been involved in education, continued their work in universities and schools across the world. Their educational institutions, particularly those in Latin America and Asia, became vital centers for intellectual engagement in a rapidly changing world. These institutions served as hubs for a new generation of thinkers, leaders, and activists who were increasingly focused on issues such as global inequality, environmental justice, and human rights. As the world entered the 21st century, the Jesuits faced a different set of challenges. The rise of global secularism, combined with the declining influence of the Catholic Church in many parts of the Western world, presented a unique set of challenges. The Jesuits, however, adapted to these new conditions by focusing on issues that were relevant to the modern world. The Jesuit focus on education, social justice, and intellectual rigor allowed them to maintain their relevance, even in an age of declining religious influence. Under the leadership of the Black Pope, the Jesuits began to engage with global challenges such as poverty, environmental degradation, and the rise of fundamentalism and extremism. In particular, the Jesuits' commitment to interfaith dialogue and global peacebuilding became increasingly important as the world became more interconnected and culturally diverse. The Jesuits also placed a greater emphasis on their role in the global conversation around environmental issues. With the world facing the realities of climate change, deforestation, and environmental degradation, the Jesuits took up the cause of ecological justice, emphasizing the moral responsibility to care for the planet and its most vulnerable inhabitants. In this context, the Black Pope's leadership was crucial, as he guided the Jesuits to adapt their mission in response to the urgent challenges of the modern world. The order's commitment to sustainability, justice, and peace was evident in their initiatives in education, advocacy, and social activism, making them relevant not only in religious circles but also in the broader global discourse on how to address the critical issues of the 21st century. Throughout these transitions, the role of the Black Pope remained vital. As the Jesuit order adapted to the changing world, the leadership of the Black Pope ensured that the core values of the Jesuits, faith, intellect, social justice, and education, remained central to the order's mission. The Black Pope continued to navigate the challenges of the modern world with a blend of intellectual insight, spiritual guidance, and political savvy. Under his leadership, the Jesuits were able to maintain their place at the forefront of global discussions on human dignity, justice, and the search for peace. The Black Pope's influence, while often unseen, continued to shape the Jesuit mission, ensuring that the order remained a powerful force for change in the 21st century. As the world faces increasingly complex and interwoven crises, the Jesuits' ability to navigate these challenges with both spiritual wisdom and intellectual rigor positions them as one of the most enduring and influential forces in the modern world. The evolution of the Jesuit order in the 21st century offers a fascinating study in adaptation and resilience. Despite being faced with a rapidly changing global landscape, one that includes shifting religious affiliations, political unrest, technological advances, and an increasingly secular world, the Jesuits have managed to retain and even enhance their influence. At the core of this success is the strategic leadership of the Black Pope, the superior general of the Jesuits, who continues to steer the order through turbulent times. His role, while often understated, is critical in maintaining the Jesuits' commitment to education, social justice, and global engagement. These core values continue to guide the Society of Jesus in a world that is marked by new challenges and possibilities. The 21st century began with profound shifts in global power dynamics. The collapse of the Soviet Union, the rise of globalization, the spread of digital technologies, and the surge of populist movements all fundamentally changed how societies engage with one another. These changes presented both opportunities and threats for the Jesuit order. On one hand, the proliferation of communication technologies allowed the Jesuits to extend their reach even further, connecting with people in parts of the world that had previously been inaccessible. On the other hand, the increased secularization of many Western countries, alongside the decline of religious authority, posed significant challenges. The Church, once a dominant force in shaping world affairs, was now grappling with issues such as declining attendance, scandals, and the erosion of traditional influence. In the face of this, the Jesuits, under the leadership of the Black Pope, doubled down on their commitment to intellectual and educational pursuits, while also addressing the new societal challenges emerging globally. One of the key areas where the Jesuits have maintained their influence is in education. Jesuit universities and colleges, scattered across the globe, continue to be among the most prestigious institutions in the world. These institutions, often located in urban centers of political and economic power, have long been known for their rigorous intellectual environments and their emphasis on moral philosophy. In a world that increasingly values specialized knowledge, the Jesuit educational model stands apart because it emphasizes not just professional competence, but a broader sense of ethical responsibility. Jesuit institutions focus on producing graduates who are not only skilled in their chosen professions, but who also understand the broader ethical implications of their work. Whether in law, medicine, business, or the arts, Jesuit education continues to shape individuals who are committed to improving society and addressing the most pressing global issues. This educational model, which blends intellectual rigor with a commitment to the common good, has allowed the Jesuits to remain relevant even as other religious orders and secular institutions struggle to maintain their influence. The role of the Black Pope in this effort is crucial. As the spiritual and administrative leader of the Jesuit order, the Black Pope is responsible for ensuring that the order remains committed to its core mission while also responding to the challenges of a rapidly changing world. The Black Pope's role is not just one of overseeing the daily affairs of the Jesuit community, but also one of intellectual leadership. He must ensure that Jesuit institutions continue to be centers of intellectual innovation, moral inquiry, and social engagement. The Black Pope also plays a critical role in guiding the order's social justice initiatives, ensuring that the Jesuits remain focused on addressing the most pressing issues of the day, such as poverty, inequality, environmental degradation, and human rights. In the early years of the 21st century, the Jesuits' focus on social justice became even more pronounced. While their intellectual engagement with global issues had always been a hallmark of the order, the 21st century demanded a renewed focus on social activism, particularly in regions where poverty and inequality were rampant. Jesuits continued to be at the forefront of movements for social change in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. They were particularly involved in advocating for the rights of marginalized groups, whether they were indigenous people, refugees, or victims of violence. This activism was not limited to isolated local efforts. Jesuits increasingly worked on a global scale to address systemic issues such as climate change, forced migration, and economic injustice. One of the most significant issues that the Jesuits have addressed in the 21st century is the global environmental crisis. The rise of environmentalism as a central issue on the global stage coincided with the Jesuits' increased focus on sustainability and ecological justice. The order's long-standing commitment to social justice naturally extended to the issue of environmental justice, particularly given the disproportionate impact that environmental degradation has on the poor. The Jesuit leadership, under the guidance of the Black Pope, has been a vocal advocate for the moral imperative of caring for the planet. In 2015, Pope Francis, a Jesuit himself, issued the landmark encyclical Laudato Si, in which he called for an urgent and united global response to the ecological crisis. The encyclical not only emphasized the importance of environmental stewardship, but also highlighted the connection between ecological destruction and social inequality. For the Jesuits, this document reinforced their long-standing commitment to promoting justice for the world's most vulnerable populations. It became a rallying cry for Jesuit schools, universities, and institutions to adopt sustainable practices and to engage in educational initiatives that promote environmental awareness. The Jesuits' focus on education and social justice also led them to engage deeply with the issues of human rights and global conflict. From the Middle East to Africa to the Americas, the Jesuits have been at the forefront of efforts to bring attention to human rights abuses and to advocate for peace. The Black Pope, through his leadership, has guided the order in its efforts to promote dialogue between conflicting groups, facilitate peace-building efforts, and support humanitarian initiatives. The Jesuits have long been involved in working with refugees and displaced populations, and their commitment to promoting human dignity and the protection of vulnerable individuals has remained a constant throughout their modern-day mission. Yet, as the world becomes increasingly polarized and political tensions rise, the Jesuits' role as peace builders and advocates for justice becomes even more critical. The Black Pope, in his role as leader of the order, is responsible for ensuring that Jesuit efforts are not only effective but also responsive to the unique challenges of the contemporary world. Whether through their educational initiatives, their social justice work, or their interfaith dialogue efforts, the Jesuits are positioning themselves as leaders in the search for global peace, justice, and reconciliation. In the realm of interfaith dialogue, the Jesuits have also been highly active in the 21st century. As the world becomes more interconnected and religiously diverse, the need for mutual understanding and respect between faiths has never been more urgent. The Jesuits, with their history of engagement with different cultures and traditions, have been instrumental in fostering interreligious dialogue. This is particularly evident in their work with Muslim, Hindu, and Buddhist communities, where Jesuits have made significant strides in promoting mutual respect and collaboration. The Black Pope has been a guiding force in these efforts, ensuring that the Jesuit approach to interfaith dialogue is rooted in the values of humility, respect, and the recognition of shared humanity. The increasing prominence of digital technologies has also had a significant impact on the Jesuits' work. In the 21st century, the Jesuits have embraced new media and communication technologies to reach a wider audience and to engage with the global community in innovative ways. Jesuit institutions have harnessed the power of digital platforms to promote social justice campaigns, share intellectual resources, and engage in global conversations. The Black Pope, aware of the changing landscape of communication, has encouraged the order to embrace digital tools and to use them strategically to amplify their message of justice, peace, and education. The Jesuits' use of technology has allowed them to extend their reach far beyond the traditional boundaries of the Church, connecting with individuals and communities around the world in ways that were previously unimaginable. In conclusion, the Jesuits' ability to adapt and thrive in the 21st century is a testament to the enduring power of their mission. Despite the challenges posed by secularism, global conflict, environmental crises, and technological change, the Jesuits have remained a vital force in the world, thanks to their unwavering commitment to education, social justice, and intellectual engagement. The Black Pope, as the leader of the Jesuit order, plays a central role in ensuring that the order remains relevant and responsive to the world's most pressing challenges. Under his leadership, the Jesuits continue to navigate the complexities of the modern world with wisdom, courage, and a deep sense of moral responsibility. As the world faces ever more complex issues, the Jesuits will no doubt continue to be a powerful force for good, shaping the future with their commitment to justice, peace, and human dignity. The legacy of the Jesuits, shaped by the leadership of the Black Pope, will undoubtedly continue to resonate for generations to come, guiding the world toward a more just and compassionate future. As we delve into the 21st century and consider the ongoing influence of the Jesuit order, it's clear that their role is both expansive and deeply intertwined with the fundamental shifts happening in global society. While often characterized as intellectual giants and influential educators, the Jesuits' involvement in world affairs goes far beyond academia. They have long navigated the complex intersections of faith, politics, and society, and their ability to adapt to an ever-changing world remains one of their most remarkable qualities. The current era demands new forms of engagement and activism, and the Jesuits, under the strategic leadership of the Black Pope, have emerged as crucial players in tackling some of the world's most pressing problems. In the past few decades, we have seen a surge of global challenges that place immense pressure on both religious institutions and secular entities alike. The world has witnessed the rise of populist movements, exacerbated divisions between rich and poor, environmental degradation, and social unrest. These issues have not only transformed political landscapes but have also prompted deep moral reflection on the role of religious institutions in addressing the needs of the marginalized and the voiceless. The Jesuits, who have long been champions of the poor and defenders of the oppressed, have continued to demonstrate their relevance in such times of crisis. From the legacy of figures like Ignatius of Loyola, who emphasized the need for religious engagement with the world, to the ongoing advocacy for social justice and human dignity today, the Jesuits remain steadfast in their mission. This evolution has been guided, in no small part, by the leadership of the Black Pope, whose role is pivotal in shaping the order's direction. The socio-political landscape of the 21st century is characterized by a shift toward greater polarization. The rise of nationalism, combined with the fracturing of international alliances, has made the world seem more divided than ever. Political leaders and movements that capitalize on fear, division, and the promise of a return to traditional values have gained ground across the globe. These trends have exacerbated existing inequalities, leading to increased tensions and, in some cases, violent confrontations. In this atmosphere of instability, the Jesuits' work has taken on new dimensions. Their long-standing commitment to justice, human rights, and the alleviation of poverty has positioned them to be at the forefront of global efforts to bring about peace and understanding. They have managed to bridge the gap between the spiritual and the political, positioning themselves not just as religious figures, but as active participants in the global conversation on what it means to create a more equitable and just world. The Black Pope, as the head of the Jesuits, is not just a spiritual leader but also a strategist who guides the order through these turbulent times. The Black Pope's role has always been one of balancing the dual demands of maintaining the spiritual integrity of the order while responding to the secular pressures of the modern world. This has often meant navigating complex geopolitical situations and ensuring that the Jesuit commitment to social justice and human dignity remains central, even in the face of shifting political currents. The Black Pope's ability to adapt the Jesuit mission to the needs of contemporary society speaks volumes about the strength of the order's foundations and its ability to maintain relevance in a world that is constantly changing. One of the most significant ways in which the Jesuits have responded to the global challenges of the 21st century is through their engagement with the environment. Climate change, deforestation, and ecological destruction are among the most urgent crises the world faces today, and the Jesuits have been vocal in advocating for environmental justice. Their commitment to caring for the planet has been framed not just as a moral obligation but as an essential aspect of their mission. This position aligns with the teachings of Pope Francis, who, in his 2015 encyclical Laudato Si, called on all people of goodwill to recognize the environmental crisis as an issue of moral and social justice. For the Jesuits, this encyclical resonated deeply with their long-standing commitment to social justice and their belief in the interconnectedness of all people, particularly the most vulnerable, with the earth. The Jesuits have taken concrete steps to address the environmental crisis, both within their own institutions and through global advocacy. Jesuit universities and schools have incorporated environmental education into their curricula, ensuring that the next generation of leaders is not only knowledgeable about climate issues but also motivated to take action. Furthermore, Jesuit institutions worldwide have begun to take more sustainable approaches to their operations, from reducing carbon footprints to promoting renewable energy sources. The Black Pope has been instrumental in ensuring that the Jesuits' response to the environmental crisis is both spiritual and practical, using the Order's global network to influence policymakers and encourage grassroots action. This proactive stance on environmental justice highlights the Jesuits' ability to adapt their mission to address the most pressing issues of the contemporary world. In addition to environmental advocacy, the Jesuits have continued to engage in issues of global inequality. The growing divide between rich and poor, both within nations and between them, has created unprecedented levels of poverty, hunger, and displacement. The Jesuits, through their social outreach programs, have worked to alleviate these inequalities by providing education, healthcare, and advocacy for those most affected. Their work has taken on particular significance in regions where political instability, economic injustice, and the exploitation of natural resources have contributed to the suffering of millions. Jesuit-run institutions in Latin America, Africa, and Asia have been particularly active in addressing issues of poverty and economic inequality. These institutions have provided a safe space for the marginalized, offering not just education but also a sense of empowerment. By emphasizing the value of education as a tool for social mobility, the Jesuits have helped create pathways for individuals to rise above poverty and become agents of change in their communities. The Black Pope's leadership has been crucial in fostering a global Jesuit network that can work in tandem to address these issues, ensuring that resources are allocated effectively and that the Order's global reach is harnessed for maximum impact. The Jesuits' commitment to education, particularly in the context of the 21st century, reflects their broader vision for social change. Education for the Jesuits is not just about imparting knowledge. It is about transforming lives and communities. Jesuit schools and universities, renowned for their academic rigor, have long emphasized the formation of men and women for others, individuals who are not just academically accomplished but also socially conscious and morally responsible. This ethos is particularly relevant in the current global climate, where the demand for individuals who understand global challenges and are equipped to address them is higher than ever. The Jesuits' ability to adapt their educational philosophy to the needs of the modern world has ensured that their influence remains strong and relevant. In a world that is increasingly interconnected, the Jesuits have also focused on fostering interfaith dialogue and cooperation. Religious tensions, particularly between the world's major faiths, have often been a source of conflict and division. In response, the Jesuits have actively worked to bridge these divides, seeking common ground between Catholics and people of other faith traditions. The Black Pope has encouraged Jesuits to engage with leaders from other religious communities and to work together on shared social justice goals. This approach has not only helped to build understanding but has also positioned the Jesuits as leaders in promoting global peace and reconciliation. The increasing prominence of technology in the 21st century has further complicated the global landscape. The rapid pace of digital innovation has revolutionized communication, information sharing, and education, but it has also created new challenges. Issues such as digital inequality, data privacy, and the ethical use of technology have raised pressing questions about the future of society. The Jesuits, ever responsive to the evolving needs of the world, have embraced the digital age while also grappling with the moral implications of these advancements. Jesuit institutions have become leaders in the digital space, using technology to connect with people across the globe, to promote education and social justice, and to engage in global dialogue. The Black Pope's leadership has been key in guiding the Jesuit order through this period of technological transformation. He has ensured that the Jesuits remain at the forefront of discussions on the ethical implications of new technologies, advocating for policies and practices that prioritize human dignity and the common good. Jesuit-run initiatives, particularly in education, have embraced technology as a tool for learning and social engagement, recognizing its potential to amplify the impact of their mission. This engagement with technology reflects the Jesuits' ability to adapt their spiritual and intellectual framework to the new realities of the digital age, continuing their mission of shaping the hearts and minds of future leaders. In the context of global politics, the Jesuits have remained committed to peace-building and conflict resolution. As global conflicts become more complex, involving not just nation-states but also transnational actors and ideologies, the role of religious institutions in promoting peace is more critical than ever. The Jesuits have used their global network to facilitate dialogue in conflict zones, advocating for diplomacy and nonviolent solutions. The Black Pope, in his role as the leader of the order, has worked to ensure that the Jesuits' efforts in peace-building align with their broader commitment to justice, promoting solutions that address the root causes of conflict while respecting the dignity of all people. Through all of these challenges, the Jesuits have continued to remain true to their founding principles, adapting their mission to the needs of a changing world. The Black Pope's leadership has been instrumental in ensuring that the order remains both relevant and faithful to its spiritual roots. As we look to the future, it is clear that the Jesuits, under the guidance of the Black Pope, will continue to be a powerful force for change, shaping the global conversation on education, justice, peace, and human dignity. Their ability to adapt to the complexities of the 21st century, while remaining committed to their foundational ideals, ensures that the Jesuit mission will continue to inspire and lead for generations to come.